spontaneously.
Yes.
As the classes go on, it goes, is it?
Yeah.
Automatic.
Each time we are doing YouTube live.
Okay.
How long would it stay on YouTube?
As long as we want, online. It could be, or more lives, maybe.
Good morning.
So we are now on YouTube, as you could see.
Clear today.
Yeah.
Huh?
Okay, so this is live on YouTube. So now we could come back to Zoom, and everything is good. So we could just put a laptop very closer. No, I think I could just
Yeah, on here. Move the bag. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chokila.
Good morning.
Okay, so I think we're ready to start. Morning, everyone. Morning. So we'll start with the refuge. Can you hear me? Can you hear?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Okay, so we're ready to start. I'm getting a delay back. I'm hearing a delay back. Start with the refuge. Can you hear me?
Maybe, I don't know.
Just a minute, we've got a technical issue happening here.
Yeah, but what kind?
It's folding back. Is that from the YouTube?
Oh, maybe it's from the YouTube, yeah. Okay, so it's one more information important. Okay, maybe I will write it later in manual. Yeah. So now it should be okay.
Okay, we're wired for sound. Good morning. And picture. So we'll start with the Refuge and Bodhichitta prayer. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. Setting our motivation for this morning for our second part on the 6 perfections, which is our 4th part on the module, how to develop bodhicitta. Thinking how amazing it is, because it is amazing, that I woke up this morning in the same body, having this precious human rebirth. We can think of, many beings lost their, passed away overnight. And here we are, still having the karma to continue on, taking the essence of this precious human rebirth, taking the essence, to make our life as meaningful as possible, to benefit as many beings as possible. So think today, I'm not going to do harm to any being. I'm going to place my mind in virtue as much as I can, every moment. Already doing that, having this determination to go running to the Dharma, especially cultivating this mind of bodhicitta, the most vast, expansive mind of greatest compassion towards all sentient beings, training our mind in that through the training of the 6 perfections. Thinking, when I encounter others, I'm not going to speak negative. I'm not going to do harmful actions. I'm going to guard my ethical discipline. I'm going to be generous. I'm going to be kind. And I'm going to benefit others as much as I can. So that's the purest motivation. And on the basis of those beings, just like a Buddha, regardless of whether they harm or help me or do neither, I will work for their benefit from now on, or continue on that journey until I become a Buddha for the benefit of all. So then yesterday we covered the first two of the perfections. Usually in the presentation you get a presentation of the first four and then a separate presentation on the last two, concentration and wisdom, cultivating, refining our mind until we're able to generate in the end uncontrived bodhicitta, and then combining the two, the ultimate bodhicitta. Anyway, so we're not there yet. So I just thought to offer, before we go on to patience, which is the third one, but just looking again at the progression of each of the 6 perfections. So it is said to counteract obstacles to the path. We practice them in this set order. And as we said yesterday, we practice in this set order, but we apply each of the perfections where we can as we practice each one. So the practice of perfection of generosity and ethics gives us the opportunity to accumulate vast amounts of merit that is needed, sufficient to enter the Mahayana path. The generosity that prevents the self-cherishing mind, that counteracts the self-cherishing mind by turning our mind to cherish others. So on the basis of that, so we, through those practice of generosity and ethics, which we can see is the, sort of practice of even the lower scope, emphasis on our speech, our actions, and of course, cultivating the virtues of the mind. And then on entering the path, we then work on cultivating the minds of patience, the practice of the perfection of patience, and the practice of the perfection of joyous effort. I'm just looking for what we call it here in our outline. Because I took the headings that I've used here are the headings: joyous effort. So joyous effort, joyous enthusiasm, enthusiastic perseverance, joyous perseverance. That one. Keep on keeping on. So this enables us to continue to develop the mind wishing to benefit others, to develop the virtuous states of mind, and to eliminate the afflictions, the obstacles to those. And then it is said we're forced to confront the basis of our delusions, the ignorance, grasping at an inherently existent me and mine, the self-grasping, which is innate, we say. So we're born with that. Every being has that. The fact we're in samsara, we have that. So we then, by looking at the antidote to that, which is wisdom realizing emptiness, but that has to be cultivated on the basis of being able to cultivate firm contemplation or concentration, the mind, the samadhi, the mind of calm abiding, single-pointed focus concentration, to really refine our mind. And that enables us to then apply the wisdom, and then we can join the two until such a point, as Lama Tsongkhapa says, that we don't see them as separate, they arise together. So, way to go. So, meantime, we're up to the practice of patience. So, of course, I think this is the one that is, it's so, well, they're all so important. So it's the direct antidote to anger, the mind of anger, that poisonous mind that really is toxic. It does poison our minds, doesn't it? Totally. Takes away all our rational thinking, makes us do crazy things, have a regrettable emotional episodes, and worse. So we cultivate these 3 different types of patience in this presentation. We think about it in these 3 different ways. Of not retaliating when others harm us, or when we perceive, the face of receiving harm from others that wants to blame people out there. So that's the first one. We'll elaborate more. Just the second is voluntarily taking on the problems of suffering, or being patient. So being patient with illness. The whole world is having to be collectively patient at the moment in relation to, coronavirus and so forth. But this is more our enduring our own suffering. So it segues then into the practice of perseverance and so forth, because, as we go along, we're going to have difficulties, which is then the third one is the patience willing to accept and whatever difficulty, to utilize whatever difficulty arises in the course of doing our engaging in our Dharma studies, our Dharma practice, the sense that we have great enthusiasm at the beginning, and then, what do we say? When the going gets tough, the tough get going. So you must be the toughest. We're the toughest. So you can see how this is cultivating then a mind of great strength and determination to engage in the practice. And the obstacles that we face are, lack of faith and lack of interest in the Dharma. Of course, here we are with great interest in the Dharma. That's why we're here, and we're overcoming the obstacles of, not being able to physically together, but be able to find a way, thank you technology, to be able to come together and overcome that particular external obstacle, for example. So the perfection of patience is when we're able to cease the mind of anger arising at all in our mind. So when we see anger, we say, okay, Sky's raising her eyebrows, I think. She's really interested, of course. So with me here is Venerable Chöying and Sky as for yesterday, and joining us all, as well as everyone else. And I'll just say now some more people joined, is that as yesterday, when you wish to talk, put yourself onto, you've got to unmute yourself. But in the meantime, if you mute yourself, just in case there's some background noise that you don't wish to share. Thankfully, Deb's got hers muted, so we can't hear Maitreya. I mean, I always feel weird saying we can't hear Maitreya.
I put a photo up, Chokila, so you can see her.
Okay, we can see her. She's a bird, right? She's a rather chatty one, and she likes to participate very loudly. So out of great compassion, Deb has muted herself. Or maybe just so she can hear. So if we think about, so yes, the perfection of patience is when we cease the mind of anger. So this is where we train ourselves to recognize when it's full-blown rage, too late, isn't it? As we know, when we've tried to talk to someone who's in a full-blown rage, well, it's like talking to, somebody who's under the sway of alcohol or drugs. It's sort of like their mind's been hijacked. We know for ourselves, if we were to play back some of the things that we say at those moments, or even if we recall them, they really are regrettable emotional episodes, right? So this is where I, doing the cultivating emotional balance training with Alan Wallace and Paul Ekman, and subsequently Eve Ekman, and that fascinating that the work that Paul Ekman's done on the emotions, and now Eve continuing on that legacy, his daughter. And so to what he calls, and we've got this emotional alert database, which is like our database of stored experiences we've had in this life, memories, we might say. Oh, that person, last time they gave me a hard time. Oh, and the mind of aversion arises towards them. That we've grasped on and held on to the mind of revenge or whatever. And then that meets with the actual condition, which is the person, comes in front, and then we're triggered. So what Paul was fascinated by, and of course we're all fascinated by, and this was part of our training, which is fantastic, to go back and see how quickly can we bring awareness in there? Because we want that trigger. We want that awareness as soon as we're triggered. In other words, the slightest irritation. So here we're saying we perfect this one when there's not even the slightest irritation arising in our mind. I mean, just thinking about that, you get irritated. I thought there'll be no irritation, isn't it? Something must be wrong. I'm not irritated, because we're habituated towards this. Our mind, we don't have to invite the mind of anger. It just comes uninvited, hijacks our reason, our sane mind, and then, takes us for a huge ride. And then, we know the effect that has on our body, isn't it? That we feel incredibly rattled, or, we get, hot and bothered, don't we say? I say we see red. I mean, literally, it's not we see red, I don't think. Maybe it is. We turn red, we turn very ugly. Not pretty. I mean, if, bodhisattvas, I'm not saying they're always drop dead gorgeous, but they do make a commitment to do whatever it is to attract beings to them. So I remember reading about one of the previous Karmapas, the head of the Kagyu lineage, His Holiness the Karmapa. Well, the current one is very gorgeous. And it is said that one previous one who wasn't deemed as in the world by conventional standards physically attractive, made a commitment to always come back as physically attractive. I think did a pretty good job, actually. If we take the current one as an example, very, very attractive. And that attracts people. So the job of a bodhisattva is to hook beings in. So we don't want to have this mind of aversion, because we know for ourselves, as soon as, we're in the face of someone angry, we just want to get the hell out of there, isn't it? We don't want to be in that presence. So this one. Okay, so the perfection of patience doesn't come because other beings stop doing what they're doing. They will continue to do what they do. What stops is our mind reacting in a way that's negative. Of course, the bodhisattva practices go, wow, fantastic, bring it on. We have that in the 8 verses of thought transformation, which we would be, I think, we can look at more in the next module, which is transforming problems into happiness. So we see this as an opportunity for us to work on our mind when we're cultivating bodhicitta. It says when we apply the 4 opponent powers, and we talk about the power of dependence or reliance. So here you have 2 aspects. One is reliance by taking refuge, which we just heard, on the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And, we then cultivate a mind of respect and homage and offerings and so forth. And then the mind of reliance on other sentient beings, because it's in relation to others that we're able to cultivate our minds. Thank you so very much, all of those who aggravate me, irritate me, and so forth, is the mind to have, you know, like, you know, bring it on. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, it's very hard to practice patience when you're surrounded by people who are all very nice to you. That's not how we cultivate. In fact, we can't practice the perfection of patience when everything's, you know, when in fact, it seems to be when everything's falling into place, even our Dharma practice gets weakened because we tend to get a little bit more complacent, isn't it? A little bit more, oh, everything's cruising, you know. So when the going gets tough, we jump into practice. So that's the attitude to have. So I was mentioned the 8 verses of thought transformation. So verse 5, when out of envy, others mistreat me with abuse, insults, or insults, with abuse, insults, or the like, I shall accept defeat and offer the victory to others. Sounds pretty outrageous, doesn't it? What happens when we're insulted? What jumps up? Big me. How dare you insult me, you know? And suddenly my me becomes, I don't know, huge, isn't it? Chest puff up. I want to defend me, my reputation. Hooked straight back into all the worldly concerns, the mere worldly concerns of this life, isn't it? Straight away, just like that. So thank you, beings, for causing me to see that. We hope. So we can think about that with it. And we also think, if that person abused me, what did I do previously to cause that? You know, at one of the recent Happiness and Its Causes conference in Sydney that Vajrayana Institute puts in, the woman, actually, I think she lives up here in the Sunshine Coast, Tony Powell. I think she lives, anyway, somewhere in our neighbourhood. She's a comedian and she is a storyteller. And she told this story about Miss Very Nice and Miss Very Nice and Miss Cruella de Vil, sort of thing, Miss Cruella, right? So Miss Cruella was the boss and Miss Very Nice was Tony's friend. They were having a coffee together and Ms. Very Nice is saying, oh, you know what she did to me? And, you know, oh, and she did this, and then she did that, and then she did that. And then as Tony says it, she says, and what did you say to her just before that? What did you do? Aha. Then her friend found out she wasn't so Miss Very Nice. She had actually been Miss Cruella. And so, so we see, you know, dependent arising. But we also look at this, even if it's not this life, we think, well, I did nothing to them, nothing. We know that it's a ripening of some past karma. So it's another way that we look at it. Something that I did in the past has caused this to arise now. Thank you for it so very much, kind person, for being the condition for that to arise. So I could purify that karma, that I could, you know, as my Jewish friends say, fantastic, one more karmic debt repaid. So like that. So that's one way we can work with it in our mind, is saying, because there's nothing that doesn't arise without causes and conditions. I always get trouble with when we get into double negatives of how many negatives I've said and making sure I do it in the logical way. So everything arises on the positive in relation to causes and conditions, isn't it? We know that. But we know that, but we forget that. And so the mind becomes irritated, frustrated, angry, and so forth. And so this is a great opportunity for us, you know, grist for the mill, to practice patience in those moments in relation to those conditions arising. So the cause So the conditions arose. So the person we perceive harming us, who indeed may be abusing us, insulting, may indeed be doing that. But we can look at it two ways. One, the cause wasn't out there. The cause was in my mind, and now it has ripened in this. So this is not to say be a doormat. This is not to say, oh, well, so karma, as we know, isn't fixed. There's a lot that we can do to, create other conditions, just even in the ripening of that instance, but it will ripen, but to create conditions to reduce the fallout. It's not like you say, well, I'm in an abusive relationship because I abused that person in a past life, so I just got to sit here and be abused. Absolutely not. This is not what this is saying. And this is why this is a bodhisattva great scope practice, because we really have to have the basis of the understandings of karma to even engage really a comprehensive understanding of this mind. So then, just one more point before I get back to your question, Kate, which maybe I've answered in just that. But the other thing is to see, as it says in the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, the chapter on patience, I mean, each verse is a great elaboration of these points. What mind to cultivate, how to cultivate that mind. So the example giving of when you're, hit with the stick, someone hits you with a stick, why blame the person? Because it was the stick that hurt you. But why blame the stick? I mean, we think that's crazy, right? Actually, when I was a child, my mother, I remember, when I'd fall over as a little 4-year-old, maybe younger, I'm not sure, but fall over and on the path and, be upset, oh, I hurt my knee. And my mother would say, oh, well, just give smack the path. So I'd smack the path and feel so much better. So it works for a child. It's a childish response. It worked. Very skillful, Mum. Thank you very much. But I also know that is not the fault of the path, because actually it is in dependence on the path that I can get up again. I've got to use it, the ground, to also stand up after that. So it's independence. So different ways we can think. And then also, why blame the person? One, we can think of the karma ripening, but we can all, so where was I at fault? But we can also think that person, if we're talking about anger being like alcohol or drugs or something, it's totally deluded mind. So why then blame the person? Because their mind's been hijacked by that emotion, right? So it's not a blaming game. Of course, we have to protect ourselves and get the hell out of there. I mean, we've got to use the wisdom side as well. We can have compassion for that person and blame the delusion. That's okay. Compassion for the person. But also, in the circumstance, you remove yourself. You do whatever is necessary. You report them to police. I don't know, whatever is necessary. So, Kate's, what are your comments for those who are being abused and tortured and who need to recognize the manipulation, the repeated absorption of blame by the perpetrator? Yes, we don't buy into their story. Of course we don't do that. When we think about, again, the inspiration of great beings in Tibet, lamas, one lama who, when he was imprisoned for 20 odd years or something in Tibet. And then when he subsequently was released from prison and then we managed to get to India, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama said, did you ever think you were in fear, from were you ever like, in fear? And he said, yes, I felt fear that I would lose compassion for my torturers. Of course, expose the torturers, do whatever means, but don't lose the mind of compassion. This is huge, isn't it? Gosh. Well, that's the inspiration that we take. So we don't buy into, we've got to look at, all of this is empty of inherent existence. It is a dependent arising. So if I can't change the situation, and now we have this concern at the moment, isn't it, with, concern for increase in domestic violence at this time when, people are in lockdown with their perpetrator, of abuse. Very sad state of affairs. So there are supports for that, and you reach out for all those supports. You do what you need to do in those situations. But then as much as we with our minds can see, any way to use this as an opportunity to transform my mind. And this, of course, I'm going to say now, is the next module. Okay. So stay tuned for the next installment. So we have to think about this, that, of course, we've got to do whatever we can. We've got to, if we're Bodhisattva, we'd be helping prevent that person by engaging in more harm, because thinking of the effect it is for their mind, the effect of delusions on their mind. So we think about this, even people who are not maybe close to us, but in the world, maybe a world leader or two that we have great difficulty with. But we can have compassion for them. On the one hand, we can appreciate their good qualities and the virtues they've had that's got them into the places they are. And then the rest, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, karma of the world and karma of those countries, to have those leaders. So it's a collective thing, just as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, the collective thing of Corona, one of the teachings recently, why the world had to have coronavirus. Well, not specifically that, but in this degenerate time and the ripening of past karma arising in this pandemic. So these are vast ways of thinking about it. They're challenging ways. But at a conventional level, we have to do whatever we can in those circumstances. So Nikki, I have been very angry with COVID. That's why I'm here. And I abused my friends weeks ago after too many drinks. Well, when we take refuge, isn't it? And that fifth one that got added in, we take refuge, and the Pradamoksha vows, the vows of individual liberation, that is that fifth one, no intoxicants. Why? Because look what it does to your mind, just like anger, as toxic as anger. Your mind gets out of control, doesn't it, Nikki? Your mind got out of control, and now you regret it. So now you do your Vajrasattva practice and you purify, or you apply the four opponent powers, make a realistic determination to do whatever you can as immediately as possible. First of all, apologize to your friends for whatever. You may have done all this already, of course. You may be just making the point. And then purify the mind of that, because the amount of time it stays in the mind is going to be the cause of you being the recipient of anger again in the future, and abuse. I abused them, I've created the conditions for that in future experiences. But all of this can be purified. It's not like it just has to sit there and fester and grow, is it? We can purify it. So I'm sure, Nikki, you've done all that already. Yeah, Julie, good point. So we are challenged, and this is good because we look at our afflictions arising in response to the current situation. And we can think, well, I don't know. I'm not a world leader, you might have guessed. I don't know what sort of deliberations you've got to have and what sort of conversations you've got to have and what sort of advice you have and what sort of things you have to negotiate. Because the thing that's been interesting for me looking at the situation in the USA, which is the one that Julie's raising. I mean, it's a horrific situation in terms of the number of people who have died, the number of people infected, the amount of fear and anxiety there must be. And we can have compassion for all of that. But look at the people who are protesting out of anger because their minds can't cope with the restrictions that have been placed on them. They see it as unfair. They see it as against their rights and so forth. So that mind, you have to have compassion for those minds, and then the leaders have to try and negotiate around that so they don't have civil war. I mean, I think that's a very tough gig, I have to say. And, you know, we can from a distance, you know, make just blanket judgments, criticisms, judgments that don't know the whole picture. We don't. And this is what our mind's doing all the time, pointing a finger out there, blaming. What we're invited here in the practice of patience is put the blame on the one, the self-cherishing, the self-grasping, that wants things, want to hear the words that I want to hear, want to see the things that I want to see, you know, have the experiences the I wants to have. So we use that situation. I remember, I mean, I totally get what you're saying, Joy, but I remember the situation many years ago with a previous prime minister, long time ago. And I remember saying to one of my teachers, he has no compassion. You can see how I was saying that, right? He has no compassion. I was not doing it with a calm and patient mind. And my teacher said, he says the words. So after deleting the thought that immediately rose, yeah, but he just says it. Okay. Then I had to think, okay, we say the words just like us, you know, as we were talking yesterday, just hearing the word emptiness, just even contemplating that has a powerful effect on the mind. So even saying the word compassion, okay, immediate result, not evident, but over time. So we see that in ourselves over time. This is, we're in there for the long haul, right? So, so to begin with, for ourselves, Deb, I'm rejoicing that you're getting better at recognizing anger early, recognizing it at all. You're ahead of the game. So, hey, I'm rejoicing in that because this means you're practicing. And yes, we can all relate to that. Of course, you know, when we do our purification practice and we make that determination, I will never get angry again. Well, of course, you don't make that determination because that would be a lie to the merit field, to all the Buddhas or the gurus, and that's the heaviest negative karma. So let's not go there. You say, okay, as long as I'm doing this practice, the mind of anger hasn't got the opportunity to arise. So I can safely say that while I'm doing this practice, while I'm engaging in virtue, there's no in for the mind of anger. So the conclusion is the more I practice virtue, you know, even, you know, in relation to others, sure. But when I'm on my own or when I'm in together with a group saying the prayers and doing the mantras, protection for the mind. This is why it is protection for the mind, because you're engaging in that virtuous activity, listening to the teachings and so forth. And then you're preventing that mind arising because they can't arise in the same moment. Yes, it can come quickly afterwards. We can get irritated in a nanosecond, isn't it? The self that wants everything to be comfortable, be nice, just as I want. Claire, yes, please turn on your mic and ask your question.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very nicely.
Lovely. So just to, because I've never really understood the analogy about the stick before,
Yes.
and I think I might understand it now, and I just wanted to check.
Okay.
So anger, for instance, would be like the stick that hits, because another person's mind that is so deluded that it attacks the other is not in its natural state of loving kindness, and it is hijacked by delusions that were created by causes and conditions, and therefore it is anger that harms, not the person, just as it is technically the stick that harms, not the person wielding the stick.
Okay. Let me rephrase what you said slightly. A lot of that's correct. The stick doesn't represent anger. So I think you're taking the analogy too far. The stick, you can say the stick harms you. You know, I got hit by the stick. So the conclusion is, why get angry with the person if it's the stick that hurt you? And then you say, hold on a minute, I can't blame the stick because it's actually indeed in the hands of that one. So it's under the control of the person who's wielding the stick, right? But then you say, well, I can't blame the person because they're under control of the delusion of anger. So
Yes.
And that I'm a recipient of that anger is caused by whatever previous incident, and karma is very individual. So in some, if not in this life, in some past life, it may be an instance earlier in this life or past life where I have been angry or irritated or caused some harm towards this person. As don't have been a person, we could have been lions and tigers and any beings, you know. But it's some ripening of that karma, which I haven't purified in my own mental continuum. So maybe there's some more thinking to go on about.
Okay, yeah. No, I understand how I took the metaphor a little bit too far.
Yeah, our minds love to create a big story on top of the story, on top of the story. They do that. So this helps refine.
Thank you. I'll turn my mic off now. Thanks.
Okay, so Kerry, I think I'm going to come to your point soon. So hold that one on pause, and if I don't, come back to it. So Graham, everyone is a good person that are ignorant and controlled by delusions. Well, good person's a label. Good person comes out from our ethical discipline, we could say, by engaging in ethics, being, you know, our moral discipline, our perfection of our practice of that is being a good person, right? So in that way of thinking, everyone isn't manifesting as a good person, right? Everyone is indeed under ignorance and controlled by delusions, karma and delusion. So the karma that throws us into this rebirth, and then the delusions that we've accumulated since beginningless time that manifest in all these instances of regrettable emotional episodes, or the thoughts, or in this case, talking about anger, from the slightest irritation all the way up, you know, arising in our minds. So I think what you're getting at, Graham, is our innate drive is towards, you could say, virtue. Our compassion, our loving kindness and so forth are, we say, you know, they're like the flowers in the garden, or they're sort of rather hidden by all the thorns and entanglements of all our deluded states of mind, the weeds, and we rip those out, and our natural beauty, all that is virtuous and kind and so forth can flourish, even in the context of the world in these degenerate times, so-called. So is that, as His Holiness Dalai Lama has made the point, that the human realm, or the human population in this world, which is not the whole human realm, there are humans in other realms, so, but the human population of this world is increasing. So even though we have wars and pandemics and so forth, that there's population, certainly people lose lives, but if the human population's increasing, that would indicate that, one, we haven't killed each other off, we haven't annihilated each other, so that there are more people working for the greater good. Think about it like that. Then who are doing the opposite. And this is a good point too, because the practice of patience is a way of creating harmony in our communities. You know, we're patient, don't get in our families, not reacting to the slightest little thing, you know. Just, you know, build up our mind of loving concern and compassion towards others. And it's a great contribution to world peace, to harmony in our communities, you know, like here at Chenrezig Institute, our household, which is now 40, I think. So creating harmony, working together. And I don't know, it's been nice in this time of having to close down. Not that bit's not been nice at all, you know, but the fact that, you know, looking out for each other, supporting each other and so forth. This is our nature. This is what we're naturally driven to do, to benefit each other. So we can think like that. Okay, so continuing on, practice of patience. And then in relation to those who harm us, we can also see in the world, you know, and this is looking at our wrong views, as Shanti Davis said, you know, for every irritation there is, you can't, you know, you can't cover the whole world with leather to protect your feet from harm. Just wear shoes. It's pretty sensible, isn't it? Actually, you know, it resonates so deeply for me, you know, from the thorns, the prickles and so forth that affect us. Because having been in Namibia, where Rehoboth, sort of semi-desert, and the thorns are sort of quite big. They're really big. And the soles of my shoes would get ripped. You sort of wanted to cover the earth with leather, but you can't do that. Fortunately, I had a friend who was, his father was a cobbler. So I'd get new shoes from his dad. But it's like that. We focus on the external things and want to make it nice out there. And I think we just have to focus on making it nice in here. So, and then also we can reflect on the disadvantages. I was just looking. The disadvantages of not practicing patience. Again, in the Bodhisattva's way of life, this verse that we mentioned yesterday, if something can be changed, change it. If it can't change, why change it? If it can be changed, change it. No need to worry, get anxious, get annoyed. So why? There's no need for unhappiness. If we can change it, there's no need for unhappiness if we can't change it. So we do whatever action we can. And think all of these people who are annoying me, as Jitsuma Tenzin Palmer says, is like sandpaper. They rub us up the wrong way. In the process, we get smooth. So I always think about that. I always think, how much am I prepared to tolerate? This actually comes up in the next perfection of joyous perseverance, joyous effort, is how much am I prepared to tolerate? So here we take patience with suffering. We have patience with suffering as we go along, illnesses and so forth, and sufferings that we experience, because if I can't bear even the slightest discomfort in this life, and if I arise a mind of anger, of irritation and so forth, depending on the level of that, I'm sure destined, and I don't purify it, for the hells, for the hell realms. This is the cause for rebirth in the hell realm. If I can't stand this, how could I ever endure a moment in a hell realm where it says, like in the hot hell of Vici, even one tiny fire spark of fire on the body of a being in that hell realm is thousands of times hotter than all the fire in this world system, than all of the fire. So we had the bushfires, at the beginning of the year and so forth. So if I can't tolerate that, and I allow this mind of anger to get out of control, then I'm going to be in such a situation where anger is going to be absolutely the norm. Myself and every other being there, totally out of control and totally huge suffering beyond what we can imagine in this world. So we can think about that as a deterrent and think that, where does my mind of anger come from? So it said that the mind of anger, isn't it, comes from our desirous attachment, not getting what it wants or getting what it doesn't want. So it comes from my own discontent, my own unhappiness. And then, left unchecked, pretty much soon becomes anger, hatred, rage, and so forth. So whether, for example, coming back to the question about, what if somebody's got a mental illness, and it's, yes, there are situations, talking to a friend recently who's, supporting someone, living with someone with a mental illness and taking all the steps and who's very abusive in that and making the other one quite fearful. But you've got to have compassion for that one. They're just like the person under the control of alcohol, the person under control of anger. It's not like an excuse, but to say they are under the control of, I don't know, I can't imagine that suffering of that mental illness that has those words coming out the mouth, that has that abusive behavior, totally out of control. My sister used to foster all these kids, now she turned 70 this year. I think a few years ago, she thought maybe it was time to retire from being a mum. I mean, she's still a mum. She's still got one that, or two she adopted anyway, one that's still in contact. And of course, she's still a mum. But, so many young people that she provided a safe place for, loving, kind mum. And, they were very damaged. Like, she would get people that say, okay, if it doesn't work with you, this kid's destined for home, an institution. And like, for example, one boy, he had Asperger's. Anyway, he killed the dog. He had things, he was out of control. But then he'd be really loving. And you could see this mind, this little boy totally taken over by this mind, and your heart weeps, right? So again, I think it's like the abuse situations and so forth. We do whatever we can. We take the steps we need to take. Of course, you don't just sit there and take it. You do whatever you can to get help, to get support. But compassion for the person being taken over by this disturbed state of mind. You know, I used to, in the early days of when I was visiting prisons, and I would visit this forensic hospital where people who were deemed not responsible for the crime due to mental illness. And, you know, I'd be leading meditation for these guys, and even they, you know, one would say, oh, it's a bit hard this week, you know. But at least they had the capacity to be able to gain some concentration, some focus on their mind. And I remember one time, because it would be in different spaces at different times, and then we were next to a guy who was in a padded cell because he was throwing himself around, screaming. It was totally out of control. And I thought, that poor guy, there's no way that he can sit quietly and calm his mind. It's just out of the question, you know. So you've got to have compassion and think, you know, may that karma for them be completely purified as swiftly as possible. So in our practice of patience, the patience when we're suffering, and to think our suffering as well, as, you know, the Buddha said, all the sufferings, physical, mental, emotional, all the sufferings that we have in life come from our own mind. All the sufferings of the world comes from the minds of the beings inhabiting the world. And we can think about enduring illness, enduring, as I said, even the smallest suffering. So, for example, it was rather cold yesterday, wasn't it? All of a sudden. We were warned. We were told it was going to be, and it was. It's only relative, though, of course, because Geshe-la said the other day, oh, you people, it gets to 8 degrees and you start rugging up, you know, let me tell you about Tibet. It's all relative. But I did think about it afterwards, because I remember living in Canberra for a few years, and is it your blood thickens or thins? Or anyway, you adjust. I think we talked about that yesterday. But why not endure at least, even if you're not tolerating it very well in your mind, keep it in your mind. Don't let it come out in complaints. We all know it's cold. Oh, it's so cold. I feel so cold. Oh, I feel so cold. We're just embellishing that mind. And it's not contributing to anybody else's lack of cold. Maybe they were feeling warm until you said that, and they thought, hold on a minute, now I feel cold too. So think about our suffering. And of course, last week, you know, we were looking at the practice of exchanging self with others. And when we went away with the Tonglen practice of being willing to take on suffering. This is the practice of a bodhisattva, willing to take on that suffering for the benefit of others. If we could, we would take on theirs as well. But what that is doing is enhancing our mind to be able to benefit others. So we have to think like that, to reduce the power of that suffering over our minds. So, for example, you know, when I was in hospital, this was quite some time ago, actually about 12 years ago now, 13, 12. And Choden Rinpoche was teaching at Vajrayana Institute, and my poor pity mind that was saying, oh, that's not fair, I'm in hospital and Rinpoche's there and I can't go to the teachings, and there was no Zoom. Be okay now, you could Zoom, maybe, because actually I don't even think I could connect on the internet. where I was. But anyway, I was supposed to be resting anyway. But of course, the message came from Chodron Rinpoche. What was the message? Fantastic. Great. Doesn't sound compassionate, does it? But the next bit, better than eons of hot hells. Okay, a month of inconvenience, I'll take that. It's just like reframing the mind around that to say, yeah, here am I suffering. And I could say it could be a ripening of my past karma, but it was also a ripening of the fact that there I was in Bodh Gaya without a face mask on, prostrating into the dust. And I got a communally acquired pneumonia. It happens, as we see now, right? Community. They're looking at how many is community acquired and how they can put regulations in to prevent that spread and so forth. Fantastic, rejoice. So we willingly take on, the sufferings, or even if we can't do that, enhance the mind that is able to, that it makes us stronger, makes our minds stronger. And then also the patience with ourselves as we engage in our Dharma studies and practice. And this segues very nicely into the next perfection of joyous enthusiasm. But, obstacles come along the way, isn't it, in our Dharma practice? So we have to have patience with that. So patience is not a step of inaction. So we have the patience of not retaliating to those who cause us harm, the patience willing to take on the suffering and enduring hardship in Dharma practice. I always think of Lama Zopa Rinpoche because Zopa means patience. And I just think Rinpoche is so patient with us most of the time. There was, at the last retreat in Bendigo where Rinpoche, somebody asked a question about, anger and so forth. And it was actually our oldest student who, anyway, I don't know the whole context, but apparently Rinpoche had given them some advice, and Rinpoche looked at them and said, well, what makes me angry is when I give someone advice and they don't follow it. Now, I don't know if that was a direct personal thing, but I know for myself, I went, gulp. I think I'll just stay quiet now. So in the course of our Dharma practice of enduring hardship, now this is not the sort of get out the whip and flagellate yourself or anything. We're not talking that sort of, yes, there are austerities and to reduce our attachment to external comforts and so forth. But, we're going to experience obstacles along the way. Like when I was in hospital and thought, this is an obstacle to me being at the teachings. Well, it was a slight obstacle because actually, very fortunately, people would come and visit me with recordings of the teachings. And then Rinpoche also gave me, Rinpoche had been teaching on the 7-point mind training. And so he sort of gave me practices to do and things like that. So that kept my mind busy. And I was connected then. And then I would just sit on my edge of my bed waiting for them to give me permission to go out for the afternoon. That was the following weekend. And then I was able to go to the teaching and people very kindly got me and anyway, took me back and so forth. So also I remember at the Kala Chakra in Amravati in 2006, at the beginning of 2006, and getting very belly sick, but determined to see that Kala Chakra mandala when we had the opportunity to line up in the stinking 40+ degree heat and surrounded by, I think these Tibetan women very kindly, because they push quite strongly, kept me moving forward. And I just kept saying to my friend, just keep saying this mantra, just keep saying this mantra till we get there. So, it's great to see how we can endure hardship for the benefit of our Dharma practice, because we are going to experience that. And I have heard the saying, if you're not experiencing difficulties, then maybe you're not practicing. But, the difficulties that arise in our minds, I want to do single-pointed concentration, but my mind goes out the window. And we persevere, we persevere, we persevere. The comment from Nikki. Yeah, it's good to recognize anger. And I think, Nikki, you were talking about this during the week. We recognize our anger, but recognize it as my anger. So there's nothing, Nikki's talking about her mother, there's nothing from your mother's side that she can do to reduce your anger. Only you can do that. You know, I was talking with someone earlier this year when we could travel, and I was in Western Australia, and someone who's got a very aggressive cancer, and whose brother, and who's, you know, like a Dharma student, so whose brother refuses to talk to her. And so she had contacted him just to let him know that she didn't have long to live, and she still hadn't heard from him. And she said, that's okay, my mind's in peace. So that's the point you need to get to. It's just like for our minds to relinquish the expectation of something different coming from their side. And we have to work on cultivating compassion for that person and their suffering. You can imagine, the situation with your mother. So, just first of all, it's right, you're not doing Tonglen. Tonglen's a very advanced practice. So you just go back to looking at your own mind and seeing where this self-grasping mind is causing this anger to arise because of not getting what you want. And so it's not a judgment, it's not a criticism, it's just seeing how our minds work and see all of this is empty of inherent existence, It's all a dependent arising, and the only thing in that dependent arising that I can change is the state of my own mind. And what, apart from anything else, who is this anger damaging? Yourself. So then that's pervading your mind. Do you want to give it that space? Do you want to give it that energy? So you just keep chipping away. Every time you see that arise, when it's full blown, it's very difficult to attack it. But that's why when you see it first arise, assuming that your mind isn't 100% angry 100% of the time, and we analyze that and say, well, no, anger comes and goes. So the same with suffering. I like to use the example, as people know, of my knee and pain I have around my knee and around my knee. So that is a total elaboration. Clearly, the knee is only there. And actually, the pain is only right there. It's in a teeny tiny spot. But even though I analyze the actual pain, and these are meditations, I can see that the pain isn't a solid block. It comes and goes. It's made up of all these, the knee anyway. I'm not sure I can say pain's made up of atoms, but the knee. And so the throbbing comes and goes, the, twinge comes and goes, or whatever. So, but the mind makes it a solid block. So we have to work on that. I think it's time to take a break, yes? It's 10 past. People want a break? There's a place here you can do a thumbs up, or you can...
Yep. Break sounds good, Choki.
Break sounds good, and it's coming from this side too. I'm getting a thumbs up here. So we will take a 10-minute break till 20 past. You can have your sound on if you want to chat amongst yourselves, or get yourself a cuppa. Okay. I'm okay. I'm good. Thanks.
You're so kind, Chen. Venerable Choki, you're like so balanced.
I'm working on it, just like everyone else. I think.
No, I've known you a long time. You've never...
Thank you. You're kind.
I'm actually very good at Tonglen, and I'm very good at doing it, and I don't do it on purpose for her. I do it for my daughter who has mental health, but I won't do it for her because she because of all the anger and just the rejection that I felt.
Yeah, so you work on your anger, because otherwise I mean, of course, our Tonglen won't be pure until we're, greater beings. But,
Of course.
one does it with a genuine motivation. So you're not there. That's okay. You recognize that and you just work on where you're at.
Well, you know what? I said to my dad? I said, she's dead to me and I'm going to contest the will. This was because she came to Sydney and a whole lot of rejection from my family, and I haven't been feeling very supported. Anyway, the next day I woke up sick to my stomach and I thought, you know what? This is killing me.
Good.
This is actually killing. I actually was sick. I had a headache. I felt sick to my stomach.
Yeah.
And I thought, saying that out loud, and even he got a shock. He said, that's awful. And I thought, saying that out loud, and do I really wish that? And I thought, I actually feel sick today. I can't be at peace like this.
No, because it's out of sync with reality. So any disturbance to our mind is like that. And you're recognizing that. So that's really good. You can see, as you say, you're describing physical of that. And that happens, isn't it? So this is what anger does. It poisons our body, poisons our mind, really shakes us up.
That's what I got out of it. I got out of it is I thought, oh, it's all right to think that, but I'm on my own, which I hate. It makes me more lonely, and it's actually makes me feel less at peace than I already do, which is not much. So I felt very disturbed the next day when I made that declaration to him.
Yeah. So,
because before we used to be just like nothing, like polite. And then I thought, she comes to see my cousins and she won't come and see her own grandkids and me, and she's always been awful. And then my mind, yours probably doesn't, mine goes on 100 miles an hour and this and that. And then I worked myself up and I thought, you know what? You could actually die and I don't care. And then I said it, and then I thought, I feel actually sick for saying that.
Yeah. Yeah. So you just keep working.
I didn't say it to her.
Which is great.
Dad got it.
That was a good thing. I mean, we've all got stinking minds, let's face it. And so we just work at it. You see that as an opportunity, and that's what you're doing, Nikki. You're not giving up on the Dharma. So that's what's most important, is that you see this as an opportunity. In fact, when people go on retreat, they go on long retreat and you think it's going to be hunky-dory, and probably people doing long retreat, I hope, don't think that, because it's totally not that, because we have to get that stuff out, get rid of all our toxic stuff. So this is the opportunity. It's coming up big time opportunity.
And also I haven't been practicing, and I think that's something that I haven't even admitted to myself. I've taken vows, I've taken Yamantaka, I've been to the centre for over 10 years, the Chenrezig and Vajrayana, and all of a sudden I just joined the yacht club and started, having a few drinks and, getting into a different mindset, and all of a sudden I found those old behaviours crept up.
So this tells you how much you need to have the structure of your Dharma practice. So
I know
maybe separately, if you want to send an email, Nikki, and we'll get you back on track with your practice.
No, I know what to do. I
good. Okay.
I just
all right.
I wasn't doing it.
Rightio. So
I wasn't doing it.
And this is why we stay around like-minded people and so forth who are going to encourage us with our practice. So, that's
the only thing.
Get back on the horse, get back on track.
I've been slack. Because Vajrayana, I live in Manly. Vajrayana is really not that. I don't like to cross the bridges, you know.
Well, you can join on Zoom these days, you know, get all the teaching.
I
on
know.
Zoom. You probably are because you're Zooming in here.
I am, and I'm
Great.
enjoying this Zoom.
Fantastic.
Because I didn't enjoy Zooming to Ashfield. And even though, you know, they used to walk for miles just to get a little bit of a teaching. So I am slack. But I don't know another Buddhist person. And that doesn't help.
You've got about 30 of them here right now with you.
That's what I mean. I've got to make more effort to go to the centres.
Well, you
I
can't
came
right
in
now.
July. I came.
You can't right now. So now you can see. Now you can see how that opportunity can be taken away from us in a nanosecond, as it sort of seemed to be to us. All of a sudden, close your gate.
I thought I was going to Bendigo.
Yeah, so did we all. I mean, not all, a number of us. Don't worry. So just hang in there, Nikki.
Yeah, but I just can't
ease up on
stress.
yourself.
Oh no, I've got to restrain myself. Trust me. Even the friends, you know, that I told off, I'm sure they'd agree that.
Oh no, you've got to restrain yourself. But put the whip away is what I'm meaning. Put the whip away and just say, okay, I'm getting back on track, and just be determined.
I just can't stress, and I won't prattle on anymore. You've got to enjoy your tea and your peace, but I can't stress how every time I let go of the Dharma, I crash and burn. It's only a matter of time, but it will inevitably happen every time.
So you can use your wisdom mind to remind you of that.
No, don't forget.
We forget easily, don't we? That's why our mind, our capacity, I can forget about anger, but it'll still come up.
Yeah, I've got to try harder.
You've got to work at.
You got to work at.
Anyway, we're going to be talking about that now. So go and have a little break. I know, I'm good. I'm surrounded by everything I need. heaps of sleep. It's when I don't drink enough. Like yesterday, I mustn't have drunk enough. It seems to be. When I teach, I don't drink enough. Well, I do drink, but okay, so oh, good. Eva's sent advertisement for the Dharma Buddies. So if you want to join, if you have emailed me, I didn't check this morning, but if anyone did, then I'll just pass it on to Eva. But Eva's put her email address there for anyone who wants to join Dharma Buddies, keep the conversation going. Speaking of which, thank you for the responses about having our so-called retreat day together, our Zoom retreat day days together. So I think I might have mentioned yesterday, but we've got a program meeting tomorrow, so I have to confirm the dates, but in case something else is being planned that I'm not aware of from the, but I'm thinking the weekend of the 23rd and 24th of May, and then I'll look at it, and then we'll look at for the next, so in the mornings, 9 to 12, the same. So we'll just do one day and just fit the, equivalent of one day, sorry to confuse you. 2 days, 2 mornings. Okay. And we'll see how we go with the meditations. We should be able to complete the meditations required for this module, and those wanting to do the questions. I think I did send it out initially, but I can send it again in case people came subsequently and still want to engage in the assessment for the module, which is to complete, like to attend the teachings, to complete the readings, complete the meditations and answer these few questions, just brief answers. So I can send it out again to everyone, and then that just makes it easier if I send it to everyone. And if anyone hasn't received, hasn't emailed me, if you do that to db@chenrezig.com.au, it's the link that's on the website for Discovering Buddhism. And so then, yeah, the next module, we're looking at the dates. If we do a similar thing in June, I think it seems to have worked nicely for people. If we do 2 weekends together in June, hopefully that'll work with whatever's being else planned here for the centre. So the next module, Transforming Problems. As Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, transform problems. See your problems like you see ice cream. Not problem, opportunity. Or even delicious. Fancy that. Anyway, that's the next module after. Okay. All right. So, I'm rejoicing in the joyous effort of everybody joining in today, because we're up to the perfection of joyous effort. So I'm practicing joyous effort, rejoicing in your enthusiasm for the Dharma, because that's what this is about. So in the verse from the Guru Puja, even if I must remain for an ocean of eons in the fiery hells of Avicii, that's that hottest hell we were talking about before, for the sake of even just one sentient being. And so this time I might invite you to mute, to put your microphones on mute. So Nikki, if you mute your microphone. Thank you. Even if I must remain for an ocean of eon in the fire hells of Avicii for the sake of even just one sentient being, I seek your blessings to complete the perfection of joyous effort that out of compassion untiringly strives for complete enlightenment. So keeping in mind, as in that last line, that all of these practices are to generate this mind of compassion on the basis of loving concern, on the basis then of great compassion, to attain the mind of bodhicitta, the fully awakened mind, the fully complete mind, on the basis of even just what lengths would I go to for the sake of even just one being, for the sake of one being. So when we see those of you familiar with the wheel of life, I've got to go that way, isn't it? It sort of feels like I'm going backwards, but I'm not sure which way you're seeing it. Anyway, the wheel of life. And now I've lost my train of thought. I got so caught away with the wheel of life. You see in the different realms of existence, so that Buddhas in the different realms, because how on, manifesting the different realm. So like the story of the Buddha in the hell realm, and assisting another being, when they were being whipped and turning this iron. I always think of those playground things, but I'm sure it wasn't as pleasant as that. Those whirly things. Anyway, pushing these iron grids and, sort of assisting and then getting whipped in the process. So that moment of compassion being a ripening, keeping in mind that every little effort that we do, and particularly holding it in the mind to benefit others, the karma of that also is multiplying every nanosecond. The karmic seeds are there on your mental continuum. And this is one thing the quote that I didn't mention in relation to patience was that to keep in mind that one moment of anger arising in the mind destroys eons of virtue that we've accumulated. So all the practices that we've done like this in past, we can wipe out with a moment of anger. In other words, it can weaken those seeds there of virtue so that they don't ripen, and they don't ripen then for, eons to come. So we got to be very careful. We can't ever wipe out the merit of our wisdom. It can be overlaid with a hell of a lot of deluded states of mind, which we have to purify. So we don't wipe that one out, but we wipe out, all the great deeds that we're talking about engaging in here, all the merit of that we've laid on our mind stream, which has got to be huge, because here we are using our precious human rebirth, as we said at the beginning today, to great advantage here. So then the perfection of enthusiastic perseverance, of joyous effort, is characterized by a quality of joy that arises when we engage in virtuous activity. So on top of engaging in the virtuous activity, taking delight in that. Of course, there is some benefit if we don't have the delight, but this multiplies it manifold. And then as the Buddha taught, and as we hear very often in the teachings of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, we don't rejoice enough in our own virtues. So rejoicing in our own, but also helping other people to rejoice in what they are doing, or by us pointing out, and this helps with our compassion for those we have difficulty with, their good qualities, and rejoicing in their good qualities and what they're doing. And this is the easiest way we increase our virtue. So at the beginning, you know, when we first hear about the Dharma, or, you know, Nikki was having a conversation in the break, and so forth, when we're first engaging, or we first take vows and so forth, and we're very careful, we guard those, and, you know, we take them seriously. Of course we do. But over time, we're in there for the long haul. And all these obstacles come along that we were just, you know, talking about. Things get in the way, you know. So we're committing ourselves for the long haul. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, never give up, never give up. Keep going, keep going. If you could, you know, plan for the long term. Well, the long term in our Lama's minds is mind-blowing, isn't it? The long term is very long term, like eons of long term. So it's said in the Maitreya's ornament, among the collections of all the virtues, perseverance, joyous effort, is supreme. Through perseverance, you will come to possess supreme purity. Through perseverance, you will overcome the view of the transitory collection. So this is the view of myself, body, mind. That's the transitory collection, the 5 aggregates, different labels, as being independent, self-sufficient, you know, permanent, all these things we grasp at. So the wrong views. So is overcome through our perseverance, because we think of our perseverance in engaging in the teachings by wanting to zoom in, and even we don't maybe have good internet connection, you know, at times and so forth, wanting to grab the teachings. This is joyous effort, and the more joy, the more benefit for our mind, the more we're able to persevere and endure hardship, which we were talking about in the practice of patience. So you can see that, you know, one folds into the other. Through perseverance, you will attain supreme enlightenment. So, as I mentioned, if we engage in virtue but without the joy, they are virtuous in nature, those things. But be careful, because I was just thinking, can we engage in virtue with a negative mind? It's sort of contradictory, isn't it? Because then it's non-virtuous, because it's all what? The motivation. So we have to interrogate that. So, but by being accompanied by joyous enthusiasm, joyous effort, our motivation is strongly virtuous, and that's what transforms our mind. And then the more we do that, the less our mind is defeated by delusions. Now, we don't even have to think about the big ones, just the laziness. Oh, it's cold. I don't want to get out of bed. Oh, I know I should do this and do that, but I don't want to, you know, the self-cherishing. Look, we've all been there, done that. Especially the more you go along, because it's day after day after day after day. So, you know, whenever, as Nikki was saying, because I don't know if you're aware, you were sharing with everybody, Nikki, but the fact that I'm just mentioning that fact that,
sorry.
You know, no, I'm just going to say the example of when we take a break, if you like, from our formal Dharma practice in terms of commitments and so forth, and, you know, we don't do this practice and do that practice. Like anything in life, once we let it go one time, it's easier to let it go the second day, the third day, the fourth day, the fifth day, and then whammo. This is why we need each other, our Dharma buddies, to support us to develop this perseverance, you know.
I normally get about 4 months before I crash and burn.
Excellent. See, we've got to know ourselves. We've got to know ourselves. So if we think about the perseverance needed, I think, you know, progressing on the Bodhisattva grounds and paths is probably the greatest endurance marathon effort that you'll ever do. Because, you know, countless great eon or two. So without this, we'll never be able to accomplish great works or even lesser works. We know this in anything we learn in life. We've got to train, we've got to apply effort, we've got to study. This is absolutely everything. It's the same here. So, but with joy, because the joy enables us to persevere. And I think Lama Zopa Rinpoche gives us such a wonderful role model of how to cultivate this mind. You know, the wow, 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 wow. You know, when we do some tiny thing, wow, 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 wow. It enhances our mind. It makes our mind very joyous, very capable.
Can I just tell you a quick story? It's
Just
very,
a quick
very,
one.
just a quick one. My daughter has a lot of mental health issues. I mean, she's way wiser than me, but mentally a lot of issues. And we've had a crazy relationship. It's quite volatile, but I'm the only one that's stuck by it. Anyway, she's seen me go to all these Dharma things, you know, over the last 10 years, because that was what inspired me, because I thought, God, this kid's going to die. I've got to learn. This is above me. I better learn some practices. So for 10 years, she's seen me come up to Chenrezig and every other thing, and she just rolls her eyes. Anyway, every once in a while, which was just recently, she bobbed up, and I had put every bit of Dharma away in a box, and I put it in the garage. I said, this stuff's not working for me. I don't want to see anything. And I had it all normally on the walls. I've got, you know, all the people, Dalai Lama, all the goodies, everyone. And I ripped them all off the wall and I stuck them in a box. I know you're just gasping. And with all my beads, I said, I don't want any of this anymore. Get rid of it. Put it in the, I didn't say bin. I said, put it in the storage. And she said, Mum, you do this every 6 months. And then you wish that you were glad that I kept it. Anyway, this is from the kid who doesn't really believe. She's a bit of an atheist, but she did that for me. She put it in the cage. And then 4 days later, I started to feel like I really miss those photos. I really need that book. I actually can't do that. But I actually, every 6 months I do that ritual of going, this is not working for me. This is not me.
And you know, your daughter knows you well. So good on your daughter and yourself for recognizing that. So now if we look at, I was mentioning anything that we learn in life, and you know, think about the Olympians who train, and I guess I'm not sure now, they've got to train for another year, and maybe they'll be in Olympics and maybe not, to be at the peak. You know, they've trained to be to peak at the right time. How many years do they spend doing all that effort, all that training, day after day, getting up early in the morning, training all day, you know? And sometimes, you know, with swimmers, what is it, like 20 seconds or 30 seconds of, you know, the race that they're training for to win a gold medal or any medal or whatever. Of course, Lama Zopa Rinpoche says all of us, you know, we put that same amount of effort in. The real gold medal, Rinpoche says, the real gold medal. So if ordinary, you know, beings in the world, well, I don't know, Olympians are probably not so ordinary in their physical feats, but, you know, beings in the conventional world put so much effort into so many things. Those of us wanting to engage in a bodhisattva path, absolutely no question of putting in the, you know, as Lama Zopa says, if we put in the same amount of effort as those Olympians into our Dharma practice, wow, we'd be accelerating quite far. And then Claire says, can you practice virtue that is a Hinayana motivation? So maybe unmute yourself and just, Claire, if you'd like to, and Ingrid, I could see you've got a question too, but first of all, Claire, can you unmute yourself and just clarify what you're meaning there in terms of your motivation or a Hinayana motivation? So,
okay. It comes, I've been contemplating on the fact that when I first came in contact with the Dharma through Chenrezig, the idea of becoming enlightened for the sake of all sentient beings, I embraced that. And then the more I learned about it, the more I felt like I just wanted to avoid going to hell, basically, and purifying negative karma, making sure I didn't create any extra negative karma.
Okay.
Yeah.
I get you. I get you. So
cool.
Let's just distinguish the motivation from the practice, because the whole 3 scopes, lower scope, medium scope, great scope, which is where we're at now, all of that is a path for one individual, right? So it's not contradictory to practice the lower scope, which is focusing on the ethical discipline, as you say, out of fear of going to lower realms and the suffering of lower realms. Of course, we don't want that. And faith in the Dharma, faith in the Buddha's teachings to guide you out of that and to guide you to how to engage in a virtuous path. So that's a lower scope on the basis of which we take refuge, right? And so all those practices there, which is the capacity, we say lower scope capacity, but it is all for one individual. So we build up that. In other words, we're focusing on creating the conditions to have a precious human rebirth next time. So to the extent of the vastness of your motivation of doing that, equals strength or power of doing that. So you can focus on those same practices with a Mahayana motivation. I am doing this for my benefit, but I'm doing it, yes, to benefit myself, but I want to benefit others, you know, I want to do whatever I can. So as much as our mind can comprehend or develop that motivation, we do. And then in the middle scope, which you'd say Hinayana motivation of self-liberation, I don't want to have any suffering existences ever again. Thank you very much. So we want to attain the wisdom realizing emptiness. Of course, there's innate compassion in all of us, so that will arise, but it's not your main practice at that point. So we just are gradually developing until here, what we're talking about here is the practices of the great scope, but they're on the foundation of all those other practices. So what you're doing is perfectly in sync with what the Buddha said in terms of the teachings. So no problem there.
Thank you.
Okay. Good. All right. So the 3 types of perseverance: armor-like perseverance, like armor, like we've been doing, they use this word armor as in like, you know, the protection you put on, those clothes that you put on as armor. So here, you know, we've been doing these practices, the Vajra armor mantra to protect ourselves from COVID. So this is for ourselves. And then we do the mantra and then blow it up our nose. You know, the whole COVID drop down on the FPMT website that has all the practices that Lama Zopa Rinpoche advises us to do for ourselves, right? First came the ones for ourselves, and this is totally in sync with what you're saying, Claire, and then also for others. Okay, so all those practices. So this idea of donning the armor, being the courageous bodhisattva, to engage tirelessly in these two paths, a path of method, engaging in the six perfections, coupled with the path of wisdom. So, as we say, the two wings of the bird, and combining those. And even it said a facsimile of this mind enables us to accumulate limitless merit and purify obscurations quickly. Okay, and so that generating realizations, and so they'll never degenerate. So we, whatever realizations we are generating, for example, we contemplate impermanence, we contemplate death, we contemplate karma and the workings of that, and so forth and so forth. And whatever little aha realizations drop into our mind, the next perfection, see, these all link into the next one, then we settle that with a mind of concentration to settle into our, to take hold in our mind stream. So armor-like perseverance enables us to engage in all these practices, the practice of the six perfections. And so we couple that with each one of these practices. We need that in it. Geshe Rabten in his outline talks about this as perfection of energy. And that's quite a nice, juicy term too. The energy that stops the desire for or cuts across our attachment, it said, to wrong things, to things that will distract us. The yachting club or go to the yachting club, get your exercise, but our attachment to this being the source of our happiness. The things that disrupt our Dharma practice. So
no, it's not good. Even the conversation isn't good. Like I see myself chip away, and I've got a bad back, so it's no good.
Well, it's no good. Rightio. Okay.
I need a powerboat with some Dharma people.
Oh, get your powerboat. All
with
right.
Dharma buddies.
Okay. And I was thinking of, previously in my days of being in theatre, I remember, I think it was Kabuki. I mean, I wasn't doing it, but I think it's in the Kabuki training. And then it's in, I was trying to remember, is it Kabuki or no theatre? It's so long since I even thought about it. But I remember, anyway, the puppeteers. And so they spend 10 years training to work the feet of the puppet. And then they spend another 10 years to do the arms. And then another 10 years to do the whole thing. And then you're a master, right? 30 years. But even in the animal realm, I watched this documentary where these two mates, males, and they have to do a rather complicated dance to attract the female. And so one of them's practicing it, and his mate takes the female role to practice, to rehearse for 10 years. And then when the male's perfected the dance, his mate just sort of chuffs off. I was just like, what a friend that is.
I'm still dancing. I'm still waiting.
So
I'm gonna start dancing.
If I could just keep going on this point. So it's basically the time just in, having that, that one flies away and this one does the dance and gets the woman, and wow. Anyway, so without perseverance, obviously, we're not going to attain any of our goals. Our aspiration for the mind of bodhicitta will just be hollow, empty. So a way of cultivating this armor-like perseverance is think about beginningless time up until now as one day. And 30 of those, 1 month, and 12 of those months become a year, okay? So even if it takes 100 of those years to generate bodhicitta and attain the concentration of Dharma in the mental continuum, which will enable me to see the face of a Buddha. Think about Maitreya and Arya Sangha, and the Sangha, you know, every, not 4 months, for every 4 years, quitting. Now I'm going, oh, this is hard. Oh, I haven't seen Maitreya yet, and leaving and being inspired by nature. Nature's persisting. What about me? I've got to go back in. More joyous efforts, please. But through all our efforts, to be able to see the Buddha and get direct teachings like Arya Sangha or like Lama Tsongkhapa from Manjushri, wow, to get the direct teachings and hear the speech of the Dharma, then it's all worthwhile. So we train our mind like this. It makes it worthwhile. Of course, we've got our precious teachers in the absence of having been tamed by countless past Buddhas, and in particular Shakyamuni Buddha who taught. Here we have those teachings through the precious teachings coming online, His Holiness Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, all the other centers around, Geshe Sultram here. How amazing for our minds, you know. And they, if you hear their stories, I mean, I'm always blown out by these Geshes. Well, of course, they're pretty impressive. But just contemplating the thought of them training for 20, 25 years just to be here teaching us, that blows my mind, you know. So we are at such great fortunate advantage by their persistence, you know, with that heavy duty study. So that can help us when it gets a bit too in the headache department, the teachings, I mean, and you go, this is dense. This is, I can't, you know, we have to overcome these lazinesses. So our procrastination, our, you know, sort of feeling I'm not worthy enough, I'm not good enough, that really bring us down big time. So really watching that. So, you know, we have to put in a lot of effort, As we know, those of us who've, you know, sort of been practicing for, you know, a little bit of time, you know, the benefits come along usually quite incrementally, isn't it? You know, it's very rare. I think William James in the Varieties of Religious Experience talked about the sudden spiritual experience and what he called the educational variety, which was the step-by-step, gradual, which is more powerful because it sticks, right? It sticks in your mind. And every so often we have one of those kabing light bulb moments, and then sort of, but we have to consolidate that. So we've got to persevere. This is a long haul. Okay. And if we look at the backstories of the Buddha, you know, look at all the whole Jataka tales. In this life, I was a Lachavi youth and I did this, and this life I was that. 3 countless great eons. And by the great fortune of the Buddha being able to recall these past lives, we get the benefit of seeing just what hard yards it takes to get to this point. And then we hear of our teachers, Geshe-la and others, the hardships, even at that monastery, you know, that they undertook. And Geshe-la talking about when he had a little bit of money, you know, and usually when they had a little bit of money, they'd get some decent food. Now they've got decent food at the monastery, but he said, you know, FBMT supported that, and now they're self-funding, you know, at Sarah J Monastery, but Lama Zopa Rinpoche feeding all these monks for so many years. But before that, it was, he said that, you know, after that, he said at least the food improved, you know, but then before that didn't. And all shoes, you know, and they'd have their little thongs taped up and all of this sort of thing. And so what does he do when he gets a bit of money? He goes out and buys Lama Tsongkhapa's, the volumes of Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings, and his friends go, you're crazy, you should be spending it on food and shoes. And his point is, to this day, I've still got those volumes. You know, I still read them, you know, they're still with me. So what perseverance to endure. And if any of you, I don't know, if people have visited places like Sarah Monastery or Kopan Monastery, and seeing the conditions that they live in there while studying, I mean, it's very inspiring to see that level of, you know, determination and perseverance, and based on the discipline. So incredible. And so, for example, when we do purification practices with the 4 opponent powers, like Vajrasattva practice, it says to continue to engage in that until you see definite signs of purification. So sometimes we say, oh, 100,000 Vajrasattvas. Well, that's the requirement for this Discovering Buddhism course. And it says that Lama Yeshe, and I think it's in the Becoming Vajrasattva, if you do that as a 3-month retreat, single pointed focus concentration, your mind's in the zone the whole time. So you can see how the next one, concentration, becomes so important. If you're in the zone, you know, totally concentrated, and you're completely applying the 4 opponent powers with that very focused mind, you can indeed purify all past negative karma. But you read, oh, if I do 100,000, I'll purify all past negative karma. Well, I'm in a living example of that ain't the case. Chipping at it, chipping at it, chipping at it, chipping at it. So yes, if you've got all of that, but you keep going until you see definite signs of purification. What are the definite signs of purification? Those delusions don't arise in your mind, so you don't engage in that negativity. I think there's a long way to go. So it's pretty extensive. But what we do is rejoice in what we are doing and see, I'm a little bit less prone to anger. It doesn't arise so quickly. Because if we were doing this and really earnestly doing it and we weren't seeing the results, we could say, I'm not quite so sure about this. But we see results. They don't come instantly, like the guy in prison when I was went to visit Long Bay, and he said, I tried meditation once, didn't work. Really? How long did you try? 5 minutes. I tried once, 5 minutes. Now, we all know that's not going to work. One, you tried, so that was already not the instruction. Is it? It's not the effort that clamps down. This is a spacious effort. Julie, you're fine in doing what you're doing. We have to, whatever, physical, whatever you're capable of doing, you do. You do your refuge prayer. I mean, presuming if you've taken refuge, of course, you're following your commitments. So we have all sorts of physical obstacles. This is not a physical endurance test. This is a mental endurance test. So the most important thing is the mind and the training we're doing with our mind. So this is why, whatever the Buddha said, in terms of meditation, for example, in sitting, standing, lying, walking. For some people, the thought of sitting still for a nanosecond is just beyond comprehension. It's true. So it's like, oh, but I can do walking meditation. For others, walking meditation is too distracting. And so I want to do sitting meditation. So, we work with our physical limitations or the mental ones that attach to those. Just, work with it. We persevere with ourselves, with the obstacles our mind arises. We're patient with those, but not complacent with those. And we persevere and say, yeah. And then on top of that, Julie, you rejoice in what you're doing. Fantastic. I do the refuge prayer morning and night. I do some mantra recitation. It's a good day. Okay. So energy. So overcoming the laziness of the mind, overcoming the distraction to wrong objects. In other words, if our attraction to worldly concerns is greater than our attraction to the Dharma, then we're not practicing perseverance of engaging in the Dharma. It doesn't mean we have to be saying prayers all day. It means the mind of virtue. So keep that in mind. This is the practice of engaging in virtue. So it is said, Geshe Rabden says that people who really want to practice Dharma are in a hurry, even when eating or excreting, so as not to waste time. You know, not to waste time on doing, I mean, you've got to eat, you've got to go to the toilet, you've got to do these things, they are functions. I remember one of the, keep ourselves alive so we can practice Dharma. So the motivation, the mind is, what can I do? What can I do to practice Dharma? Not that there's an urgency to practice the Dharma, but there's not like distraction in that. So that, you know, putting more of our attention to worldly concerns is dangerous. Like I remember talking to these students at a university, New South Wales University. They have the Buddhist Dharma group, and every Friday night they come along to a Dharma talk. I think that's amazing, joyous effort. It's a Friday evening. They're young people. They're not out and about partying. They're there listening to a Dharma talk. Wow. I mean, they're mostly young people. But then when I said, oh, you know, the distraction to wrong objects, when you know you've got to be studying, but you are doing all the computer games, and everybody laughed. And I thought, that's hit it on the note. That's exactly right. So easy, isn't it? You don't want to get distracted, but it's so easy to be distracted. Reminding ourselves, you know, again and again, reading the biographies of past you know, great holy beings and scholars and so forth, and what they went through and the amount of effort that they put in can inspire us. We might say, oh, there's no way I can do that, but I can do more. You know, I can do more because we're in here for the long haul. And then also protecting our minds against tiredness, you know. The sort of tiredness or weariness of the mind. It says, oh, I'm too tired to meditate, or just looking at the meditation cushion makes us tired. We persevere through that obstacle as well, because I remember being in teachings in Sydney with Geshe Sampton, and they'd start at 7, still the case, and then they'd finish at 9. Now they're finishing on Zoom at 8:30, so I can handle it better. But I would find keeping the eyes open was very difficult towards the end, you know, especially in that time when I was on precepts for so long. And so then I'd look up the Buddha image, get the light in the eyes. It could sort of wake me up, you know. So, but we can see that weakness of the mind. And it wasn't about a lack of sleep. It was just about a lack of attention. So we need to find ways to generate the energy that overcomes the weaknesses, and considering the benefits of engaging in that practice, the benefits of engaging in that study, you know. Of course, as His Holiness Dalai Lama says, we have to get a good night's sleep as well, because that enables us to be fresh, to engage in our Dharma practice with a fresh mind. So if you think, you know, people doing their jobs out there in the world, probably not getting tired because they're so focused on their work. For example, the nurses and the doctors, well, they probably are getting tired, but they're very focused on the work that they have to do. Or for some other people, the motivation being, I'm focused on the fact I've got a job and I'm feeding my family and I'm making money for that. So whichever way, focus. You know, so our job, you might have some of those jobs as well, but our job of the Dharma practice is like that, you know, except there's no clocking off. It's 24/7. Rejoice. So just, you know, working hard at that and having the confidence that, yes, I can do this. Okay, it may be, you know, Buddhahood seems a very long way off. It may be that it seems a very long way off. And indeed, I have a lot of practice to do. Just got to check my mind, and I know that. But having the confidence that I can progress along the paths. And that confidence is usually based on the confidence of having done it before and seeing the progress already, isn't it? So Jemima, the main text I'm reading from is Yangtze Rinpoche's Practicing the Path. Okay. Practicing the Path. So Yangtze Rinpoche, amazing being, he's the director of Mitripa Center in, I was going to say university, Mitripa College in Portland, Oregon, where they have the Buddhist studies. And you can go there and do a master's in Buddhist studies and so forth. Fantastic, brilliant. And this is a commentary on the Lam Rim. So the two main ones I like, well, the three, Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the path to enlightenment. The second volume covers this here. And then also Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, Pabonka Rinpoche, teacher of our teachers, who then, did a 24-day teaching, which is the liberation in the palm of your hand, in the very classic traditional presentation with all the subheadings and so forth. And then Yangtze Rinpoche doing a similar commentary, but a more contemporary one on the same thing. So it's quite nice to put them side by side, and because you'll get different examples and different phrasing. So this is 2003, Yangtze Rinpoche. So Yangtze Rinpoche and Lama Yeshe went back a long way, as a previous Yangtze Rinpoche and so forth. So, and when he teaches, it's just so amazing. You get the heart, you get from the head and the heart at the same time, or to the head and the heart. He's, wow, amazing teacher. Okay, so your perseverance to benefit others. By doing things that contribute to their happiness. Of course, this is our intention. So doing things for others that contribute to their happiness, helping them in the immediate term, long-term benefit, helping them when they're in poverty, helping them, so we see that with the homeless people. We were talking about this yesterday. Practice perseverance, benefiting it says by providing shelter overnight. Well, there's a bit of a debate about whether people can come and stay overnight at your place. I think at the moment we're now allowed to. I'm not sure. I think I read a person could stay overnight, but you're not allowed to take a holiday. So you can't stay overnight in a holiday place. Anyway, these are just different examples. Giving mental support. So even we go along with views of people. We're very patient with them, going along with their views. People who are lonely, people are, sad or have different views to us in order to benefit them. We don't have to always, in fact, better not to impose our views on others, but to support them. Of course, if we have the wisdom to know how to point them to a more correct point of view, we do that. But to know they're not alone, to support them, because you want to benefit in them in the long run. So you persevere with that, with those people, inspiring others, encouraging them to do positive actions. So this is part of this joyous effort to encourage others to enter a path of virtue. So I think we're doing that with the prisoners, although they've already discovered from their side that that's the way to go. And that's the, like with people coming here, you want to do that. So you also help people who maybe are going down the wrong path by helping them disengage from those wrong paths and engage in virtuous ones. And well, it says through your clairvoyance and psychic powers. And so they get developed through the next one, the concentration development of concentration, as we purify more and more the levels of our mind, the powers of the mind more and more develop, until such point as, like a Buddha, you've got such clairvoyance to be able to see your own past lives and the past lives of all other beings and know how directly to guide them. But along the way, there are different levels of clairvoyance, and we already have those innately. You know, if you're a landscape gardener, you know if you plant these plants in the right place, that's what it's going to turn out like. Or an architect can tell you, if you follow these plans, this is what you're going to end up. So that's a clairvoyance. It's not there yet, but you can see clearly if you've got those skills. So we all have some skills of this, but to harness that in our Dharma practice. And then, of course, there are obstacles, recognizing obstacles to our perseverance, abandoning those. So, for example, you have the capacity to do this Dharma practice, but you choose not to. I'm just reading Nikki's comment. Okay. And then, or thinking that you're incapable of accomplishing the practice at all. So this is, as Lama Yeshe says, the worst kind of laziness. I can't, so I'm not going to do anything. Well, you'll be right then, because if you don't do it, of course you can't. And we talked about the laziness of being distracted to the wrong things. So we've got to overcome these. We all experience them. And in fact, the laziness, I'm getting feedback now of myself. The laziness, I lost my point. Yes, it's the point that's most talked about in an obstacle to our practice altogether. So this is the first one we have to knock on the head. So not beat ourselves up. Oh, I'm so lazy, I'm terrible. No, we're on the same boat. We've all got this mind, because our joyous enthusiasm is not yet strong enough, hasn't yet taken hold enough in our mind to be stronger than the lazy mind that's trying to say, oh, just give up. It's winter. Wait till summer. I say in the first third of the, Kuno Lama Rinpoche talked about this, that in the first third of your life, you think, oh yeah, when I get older, I'll practice Dharma. And then the second third of your life, I've got family responsibilities, I've got job, I'm so busy, haven't got time. And then the third third of your life, oh, I'm too old, maybe next time. Well, maybe there won't be a next time. So we've got to make sure all the conditions are there, because we have the perfect conditions. We have to remind ourselves over and over again of the perfect conditions. Like the movie says, doesn't get, what is it? As good as it gets. Just doesn't get better than this. Doesn't get better than this. Think well about the leisures and the endowments, the opportunities that we have to practice. You'd be crazy not to. And thinking that, okay, I could die any moment. So there's no guarantee. Or not even I could die any moment, because in this, coronavirus time, when I've been reading people's descriptions of what it's like when you get stricken, I mean, it varies. Some people get it very mild, but I just think you could be kaput for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. The assumption that you're going to be okay is not based on fact, So, and as they keep saying, this virus doesn't discriminate. Well, aging doesn't discriminate either, I've noticed. Sickness doesn't discriminate. No, as we're discovering, aging doesn't discriminate, and death definitely doesn't discriminate. We're all going to die. So we have to think. I think, that my mind even is going to stay strong. But then if you've been around 90-year-olds, 90-plus-year-olds, and you can see the mind starts to be more frail, except for the rare exceptions like Captain Tom, and like, His Holiness Dalai Lama and our precious lamas. But why have they got that power? Because they've worked on their mind. They've persevered. They practice joyous effort for the benefit of the Dharma, never giving up. You see, with holiness, with the discussions with the Chinese, I mean, I don't know what, probably not on hold at the moment, but persevering, never giving up. Always keep the goal in mind, never deviate from the goal, and do whatever we can to work towards that. So feeling that we don't have the intelligence or strength of mind to do that is a real obstacle, you know. So we have to overcome that one. You know, think about the Buddha. Think about how long it took the Buddha. It didn't sort of instantaneously go, ta-da, here, I'm an enlightened being, you know. He worked hard over many, many lifetimes. He eliminated all the flaws of his mind and developed all the positive qualities. And think that if you think, I can't, if the Buddha said that even flies and bees and ants and, I don't know if he mentioned cockroaches, but we could, you know, we think about these beings that we may think have no function, but they have minds. And having a mind and having Buddha nature, they have capacity to be Buddha. So if they have, I've got greater capacity than that right in this lifetime. So use it well. So we train our mind, whatever way is going to work for us to keep ourselves on track. So as Yangtze Rinpoche says, our enthusiasm for practice and our perseverance on the path shouldn't be like a hailstorm falling from the sky all at once with absolutely no constancy. In other words, you know, they're on-off, great enthusiasm and then nothing, great enthusiasm and then nothing. This constant plugging away, applying ourselves over and over again. And by this continual stream of perseverance, making effort, you know, we develop more and more capacity, because what's our intention is to help as many beings as possible, isn't it, themselves. So I have to increase my capacity to be able to do that. So there's no time to get complacent. Okay, so I better leave that one way. And so the next two, concentration and wisdom. So the wisdom realizing emptiness, that's a future module. I might say a little bit, but as we've been going along, we apply that in engaging in each of these. Remember that it's all a dependent arising, remembering it's nothing exists inherently from its own side. You know, this I that I grasp at that causes me to self-cherish and relax and get lazy has no inherent existence. It's a fault of my mind thinking like that, and etc. So we can apply that all the way along. Okay, pause. So concentration, perfection of concentration, or a firm contemplation is cultivating the mind of karma abiding, having abandoned the faults of sinking, excitement, and distraction. I seek your blessings to complete the perfection of firm contemplation, in other words, firm meaning stable in our mind, through the samadhi of single-pointed placement upon the nature of reality of all phenomena, their lack of true existence. So that's already combining the next two, concentration and wisdom. But if we think just of cultivating this mind of calm abiding, shamatha, shine, in Tibetan, the way to cultivate that, and this is where it's a perfect segue from joyous effort, it's on a basis of our motivation, our aspiration, the perseverance itself, the joyous effort itself, the mind of faith, in other words, confidence in ourselves and our capacity to do this, which is part of the joyous effort, and developing the mind of pliancy, you know, as we progress in this concentration, overcoming the faults of sinking, excitement, and distraction. So these first four, faith, aspiration, perseverance, pliancy, are the antidotes to all these lazinesses we've been talking about, the lazy states of mind. And so as we cultivate the mind of single-pointed concentration, you know, there's 9 stages to that development. And it said for the first 4 stages, the distractions of the mind are like, you know, sort of a cascading waterfall and endless blah, 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 blah. So as soon as you sit down to meditate, you sit and think, like the guy in Long Bay, didn't work, 5 minutes, doesn't work for me, what's next? Our minds are like that. And this is not something 21st century. Lama Tsongkhapa talked about the mind, the chatterbox mind, you know, and how to, that focusing on the breath is best for the discursive mind. So this is elaborately presented in the great treatise on the path to enlightenment, 3rd volume, both the karma abiding and then conjoining that with the special insight, the wisdom realizing emptiness. So this is, you know, sort of the 2 of those together. But to be able to cultivate the wisdom, we need to have a stable mind. In other words, we need to be able to focus on what it is we want to analyze. And of course, at the moment, even without going to the wisdom aspect, we can say, gosh, to sit here in the teachings, to, you know, hear Geshe-la's teachings and so forth. And by the way, of course, you know, Geshe-la has started last week the teachings on the Bodhisattva's way of life, which is a much more elaborate, in-depth on this topic. So continuing on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, this week, next week, you know, for the rest of the year. And we're not sure. Might have to go on beyond that at the current rate, because Geshe-la's really taking time to really do it in a very thorough, in-depth way for our benefit. So precious, you know, so if anybody wishes to engage in that, of course, you know, sometimes, you know, at this level, we're just introducing all of this. So it can be quite challenging. So not to disturb your mind if you find it too challenging, that's okay, because the reason, you know, we have these programs at different levels. The basic programs are very advanced level, philosophical, you know, sort of based on, you know, this philosophical view and understanding of that and so forth. So it can be, it is, not can be, it is a giant leap from the discovering Buddhism level, just introducing these concepts to that, okay? Yes, definitely the monkey mind. Okay, so that's what we're trying to overcome with this one, the monkey mind. So the development of concentration, perfection of concentration, as I was just saying, the distractions arise like bucket down on us. You know, I remember the first time I led, no, not the first time. I was leading meditation one time, and this woman who was the first time that she attended. And of course, following in the Lama Alan Wallace, following the Buddha's advice, people come in. It was in the Dalai Lama's Australia office in Sydney, and it was so for the people working there. And so it'd say, okay, those that wish to lie on the floor, and so they'd head be under the desk and, you know, whatever. And this one woman at the end said, I never knew I had so many thoughts. That's what she observed, which was fantastic, because I never knew. Suddenly she knew. So this is the first thing we observe. It's the first thing we observe when we sit to meditate. It's the state of mind that we're bringing to that meditation. And then we're using these tools to cultivate, to cultivate, cultivate. So everybody, you know, suffers, endures, tries to eliminate these obstacles, particularly of the overexcited mind, the distracted mind. And it goes off onto, you know, it goes out the window, or I heard something, I smelled something, you know, it goes wherever the senses follows the senses. We all do that. But you notice, and then you bring your mind back, you bring your mind back, you bring your mind back. And so at the beginning, that one is very, very prevalent. And also the laxity, the dullness we're talking about in the perfection of joyous effort, the tiredness that seems to then overwhelm you. You know, these obstacles come along. Sometimes it is like when people go off to do a retreat, like we were talking before, we thought we were going to be in Bendigo with Rinpoche, and we would have spent, well, those of us here who would have been here with Rinpoche teaching at Chenrezig Institute may have been a little bit tired, you know, after that, I don't know. And then, you know, in those days, seems so long ago, the plan was we had our flights booked to go to Melbourne, even on the airlines that's not operating now. Oh, well, that's how it is. And so we thought we'd be down there, but probably guaranteed for the first few days we'd be very tired in the beginning. If we weren't tired in the beginning, we'd be tired in the end, because Rinpoche does have a tendency to teach long hours or late hours. So that also tests our enthusiasm, joyous effort. And then we come along here. So for this distraction to wrong object, we employ mindfulness. You know, we employ the mindfulness, and this is the definition we're using, the Buddha's definition. So the mindfulness, that is the recollection of the object of meditation. So meditation always has to have an object. Otherwise, it's not meditation. So you have to have something that you're focusing on. I mean, it's true, isn't it? To develop concentration in the Dharma context, but just in everyday life, you have to have something to focus on, to cultivate, to employ that level of concentration. So in the Tibetan, this word shine is to dwell, or we say to abide, shamatha, same, to abide, and to abide with a pacified, calm, focused mind. So this is what we're cultivating. So we have to apply mindfulness so that every time our mind gets distracted, first of all, we notice, we release the energy around that distraction, and we refresh our attention, we bring our mind back to, say, it's the breath, or it could be a holy object. It could be, you know, here we have Chenrezig, or often the Buddha image is used as an example. And that way, you know, you're engaging with a virtuous object at the same time. You know, the breath's very neutral. So it can be very beneficial and useful as a neutral object, but also the image of the Buddha. Then you get the virtue of those imprints and so forth. And we familiarize more and more with that. And then we have the quality of introspection or vigilance, noticing, you know, what's the quality. So the mindfulness brings it back. And then the introspection that notices when the mind is wavering. So we apply the mindfulness to bring it back. So the two together, you know, opposing this sort of both laxity and excitement. Be vigilant for when our mind, you know, when we're falling asleep, before we do a crash land, you know, onto the table or something. It happens. And then we keep applying the antidotes until we don't need to anymore. So we say these are like trainer wheels. So there's no point to keep bringing your mind back and focusing if your mind's already focused, because it's already focused, right? So we don't want to squeeze the mind, as Lama Zopa says. Then you relax, you're in the zone. So we, you know, have all these different antidotes to apply against sleepiness and excitement and so forth as we go along. So we cultivate these different levels. And it's said to cultivate these levels, you know, first level, second level, third level, where you can focus your mind, say, for a couple of minutes, you could do as a regular daily practice. So we know from our joyous perseverance, the more effort I put in, the more benefit, the more results I see. But to go further than that, you really have to go into a retreat, because there's too much distraction coming in to stimulate our mind, you know, as we're doing it in our regular daily activities. So for example, here, Chenrezig Institute, and we have, well, she's not here at the moment, Venerable Sondaru, who's, went into a retreat a couple of years ago to cultivate this calm abiding meditation. So she did the first year and then requested to continue on. Now, I have no idea where she's up to in her practice, but she's certainly doing the joyous perseverance, joyous effort. Of course, in January, she was destined to go down to Kangaroo Island, to the centre there, Datong Ling, until bushfire has happened. So then having to wait till after that. So now she's there, because she said even though, she was in isolation before we all were here, she was doing her retreat, there was still distraction for her. So she's removed herself from her home to be able to go elsewhere, further distance. So rejoicing in her practice to attain this. So, it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of effort to attain that level of concentration where you do have physical and mental pliancy. When we see this depicted, we see there's a diagram, and it shows all paths and all the way up to, and then you see this monk flying in the sky. And that used to be the logo we had for the prison project. I hope it didn't mean the prisoners thought they could fly out of prison. But the mind can. The mind can. Thank you, Venerable Showing. It's exactly the point, isn't it? You develop this exquisite pliancy, physical pliancy and mental pliancy. In other words, we haven't obstructed the mind with everything that obscures it, with all these afflicted states of minds and wrong views and so forth. So anyway, that's a whole other presentation on shamatha, but just say this, cultivating this mind takes a long time, because if we just observe our mind right now, it never stays on one object for a second. Somebody put up here, monkey mind, exactly that, grabbing at everything, the senses and the sensory input. So Sarah's question, do you have any advice on how to differentiate self-criticism from discipline and perseverance? So the self-discipline is a total waste of time. Criticism, not self-discipline. Self-discipline is very good. Self-criticism is just debilitating, beating ourselves up. So it has it takes away our power. So the mind of, this is why when we say the effort, joyous effort, perseverance, with a joyous mind, it makes us want to run towards it, to engage in it, to enthuse ourselves. It's a mind of enthusiasm. Fantastic, I've got this opportunity. Wow, I'm going to do this. Yes, I can. It's totally opposite mind to the self-criticism mind. And we have to, this is a deluded state of mind, the self-criticism. So the self-criticism based on a mind of pride, isn't it? Because we either puff ourselves up and say we're fantastic and I can do anything. If we're looking at the mind of arrogant pride, or we put ourselves down and say I'm no good. But they're both pride. What do we say? Inverted pride or reverse pride, or it's both based on a grasping at the self, and then either overblown importance or overblown low self-esteem. And this was very potent, when the Dalai Lama first met with those scientists. He meets with the Mind and Life Conference and all these top scientists in their field, and even other people in other fields of endeavor and so forth, the arts and education and so forth. But for the Mind and Life, it's generally the ones working on the science of the mind, psychologists and neuro scientists and so forth. did I say on the mind? Working on the brains. But you know what I mean? Neuroscientists, because I've got to measure something, right? And somebody talked about low self-esteem, and there wasn't a word in Tibetan to translate it into at the time, you know, and His Holiness is like, it was a long time ago. And then His Holiness like, what's this low self-esteem? And when finally the translator was able to translate it in a way that made, you know, His Holiness, he said, why would human beings do that to yourself? We don't think about it like that, do we? Why would we do that to ourselves, put ourselves down? You know, he cried, actually, because what happened was he said, who else has this? And they all put up their hands. These are people at the top of their field all saying, I suffer from low self-esteem. And then that low self-esteem, criticize ourselves. So a good way to counter that is to think, I want to become a Buddha. What does a Buddha do? A Buddha doesn't criticize, judge us at all, doesn't discriminate. A Buddha equally compassionate, equally loving, rejoicing. You need the Buddha rejoicing. In fact, if you were to go on and study or even read the ornament of clear realization, where it has there, you know, just even in chapter 4, you know, it has, I shouldn't say even in chapter 4, but chapter 4 is the one that's studied in basic program, you know, that the delight of the Buddhas, even we turn our mind toward the virtue. So we have to think that every time we're turning our, right now, the Buddhas are blissed out by our motivation. Don't doubt that for a second, because it's in sync with reality. So we have to, you know, train our mind, think like that. This is not a mind of pride. This is a mind of self-confidence. So it's totally opposite. Okay. So developing our concentration. So we can have, you know, there's advice when one does go on retreat, you know, make sure you have all these, you know, the external conditions that are conducive, but you can have all the external conditions in the world and the mind can still be a rat race. So we've got to have the external conditions, but we also, you know, that are conducive. Here we have a perfect environment for that, you know, conducive. But then as Venerable Sonduri said, because it was her like home and her son was working here. Well, he's out of a job because he was working in the cafe. But anyway, you know, too much distraction, which of course was all in the mind. So I'm hoping, rejoicing in her practice down there, that, you know, Daitong Ling, she's found it much more conducive. But I have to say, I've been inspired by her joyous perseverance for the last 2.5 years, I have to say. So whichever practice she's engaging, and I can't wait to see the result and the great benefit, because it's all, you know, all our teachers, Lama Zopa Rinpoche in past life, Kunsang Yeshi, you know, doing long retreat up there in Laudo, and look at the benefit in the world to us. Amazing, you know, incredible. So we cultivate this mind of concentration. Okay, and then we combine that with the next one, the wisdom realizing emptiness, as it says at the end of that verse. I mean, to do, we have had and do have shamatha come abiding courses here, and those of you who are participating in the Discovering Buddhism, particularly in the How to Meditate module, which actually is available online on FPMT. It goes into this in much more detail, but then all the, you know, shamatha retreats and so forth that here we've had in the past, Glenn Svensson, and there we have Jumper leading shamatha days, which are very popular, to be able to, you know, sort of at least dip into this practice and then joyous perseverance to continue on in that. And then, as it says at the end of that, through the samadhi of single-pointed placement upon the nature of reality of all phenomena. So this is the wisdom. This is the perfection of wisdom. The lack of true existence, a lack of inherent existence, of existing independently from their own side. In other words, the interdependence of each and every thing, which seems so evident at one level, but it becomes more and more subtle when we unpack this one, the perfection of wisdom, the space-like practice of emptiness during the meditation session. I seek your blessings to complete the perfection of wisdom through the space-like yoga, and yoga is used as a term here, meaning meditation, single-pointed placement upon ultimate truth, conjoined with the pliancy and great bliss. So the pliancy of the mind from the calm abiding and great bliss that is induced by the discriminating wisdom analyzing suchness. In other words, the great bliss that is induced with some sort of understanding of emptiness. Even you haven't, sort of completely realized emptiness of inherent existence. In other words, being in sync with how things exist. Just having that mind that is in sync is already blissful. So you experience a moment of even nanosecond of a sense of liberation, a sense of freedom from what? All these crazy states of mind. So we cut across that, by this meditation practice, where you decide my mind can engage in those non-afflictions, those afflictions, but we want to engage in the non-ones, can engage in those afflictions, can make that choice. But to make that choice, it has to be able to stand back and observe. So that's why when people say, oh, look, I saw that, I do this, fantastic, because it's the seeing that is the access to be able to cultivate that wisdom, to be able to even perceive, that's an erroneous state of mind. That's a wrong way of thinking. That is disturbing my peace of mind, especially having developed concentration. And when your mind is so refined, then what can disturb your mind is the afflictions are much more, much less potent, we could say, because, as they say, you calm the mind down, like the analogy that is used with the water. You have the water. Actually, we've just had some work done on our water systems, and there's a few messages that went around about, oh, now my water looks cloudy. Like before it just looked yellow or brown, but now it looks cloudy. It doesn't look yellow or brown anymore. And so my tap was in that category, and I just left it. I put some into a bottle and left it there, and within 30 seconds, it's clearer than I've ever seen the water. So it's like this with our minds, Well, you've got to leave it for more than 30 seconds. But, instead of agitating the mind, just put it down. Hands off. Let it settle. And that then working on the afflictive states of mind, which we say is like the pollution in the water, it's not in the nature of the water. So we know it can be filtered out. So with the cultivating the mind, the wisdom realizing emptiness is the most powerful purification practice we could ever do, because it completely eliminates at the root eventually, this is why we need the joyous perseverance, because we got to keep going at it, eventually chipping away at all our wrong views, all the deluded states of mind. We started this morning looking at anger and how that pollutes our minds big time. And so we deal with the coarse level, and then we deal with, more and more refined levels. But as the Buddha said, you don't need to go through absolutely every affliction, and depending on what presentation you're looking at, the afflicted states of mind, 84,000 afflicted states of mind, or we say the 404 or sometimes 424 affliction-caused diseases and so forth. I mean, That's a hell of a lot, you know, but you don't have to go one by one. If you can get this root one, the confused mind that gets it all wrong in the first place, which we call the mind of ignorance. As the Buddha said, oh, this is Lama Atisha, whatever you perceive, whatever you proclaim, there is nothing that has not come from your own mind. We hear that again and again, but we really have to understand that. And as Atisha said, understand that this realization of mind is empty. Understanding the non-duality of the realization of mind and voidness is wisdom. So here we've been looking at the 6 perfections, and we have to accumulate all these vast stores of merit to be able to also cultivate this wisdom to understand the right view, seeing everything is like an illusion. And we can apply that in each one of these perfections. So that angry person I'm pointing to, like a dream, like an illusion. It weakens the anger itself, like a dream, like an illusion. Myself, like a dream, like an illusion. So what's the quality of a dream and illusion? It just sort of doesn't have the substance, you know, concrete substance of this. We can look at it like that. But like a dream, when you wake up in the morning, you go, oh, phew, that didn't happen. If it's a nightmare, you know, oh, damn, that didn't happen. If it's not a nightmare, oh, well, can't win them all. So we have many ways of cultivating this wisdom realizing emptiness, which I have to say is a future module, by using a rational mind, because we can't trust, can we, this deluded states of mind that elaborates on top of what is there, what isn't there. So we usually start with this. So here I am. Here I am. Where is this I? Where is this I? Who is thinking, speaking, meditating, whatever it is we're doing. Sipping water, which is free of pollution, it seems. Good. Because our water's been filtered. Wish it was so quick with the mind. So we think about this. We investigate. You know, this is the typical presentation of investigating. Where does my sense of I come from? You can see I'm pointing here. Investigate. Is there any me there? And what is, if there was, what is it? Is it a happy me, an angry me, or this me, or that me, whatever? So if I'm an angry person, am I always angry? What happens when I love someone? Where does my angry person go? Or maybe there's multiple me's. Sometimes it feels like that, doesn't it? There's a lot of me's in there. But there's nowhere to be found. There's no substance to that. We check the whole of our body. We check parts of our body. We check our mind. I am my virtue. Well, that's a good way to go, but I am not my virtue. So then we see, well, I say my body, I say my mind. So maybe I am somewhere out there because I've got this sense of this is mine, you see. So maybe it's out there somewhere. But where? On what atom of space would that be? So it's neither here or in the collection or outside. It doesn't exist anywhere except for where? As an imputation of my mind, labeling me on top of what is here. And we're doing this for ourselves, for others, for everything that exists all the time. And we're creating that separation between myself and other. Sorry. myself and others, you know, distancing as if there's nothing between us. But in fact, here I'm looking at Sky and Venerable Che Ying, who, if I were to describe, they would find very interesting because they're saying, oh, that's not my perception of myself. Or maybe they would say, oh, that's my perception of myself. Because my perception of them is imputed by my mind. My eyes see what? A shape and colour, and that particular shape, form, I go, oh, human. And because I know them, I can not only go human, I can go female. Because I mean, sometimes from the shape, especially with my eyesight, can't tell the difference, especially when they've got clothes on. And, you know, Venerable Che Ying wearing the monastic robes, we're supposed to look alike, male and female, so, you know. So I'm imputing, and based on my, not only am I imputing the label, well, I've learnt the label from them, so maybe somebody else imputed that label. Actually, Lama Zopa Rinpoche imputed a very highest level. Venerable Che Ying. Which I always find fascinating too, because, you know, in my lifetime, you know, my name's changed a few times. So where's this mere label? You know, that doesn't make me who I am. So we investigate all of these things, isn't it? We cultivate the wisdom. We apply all of these logical reasoning to see things exactly as they are, not as the mind imputes they are. We see the faults in our own conception of things. You see, my understanding is not how it is. That person, as I see as the angry person out there, because that's my experience of them every time I meet them. But somebody else is their dear friend. So this is where we get back, segue right back to the beginning of last week, the equanimity, a sense of even-mindedness that comes as a result of this, because you're totally in sync with reality. To get there eventually, where the afflictive states of mind no longer exist. You see things exactly as they are, and then you can join that with your mind. Excuse me, I do have to find that phone. Only because I wanted to read something else on it. You can join that with your heart of compassion for the benefit of all sentient beings, the ultimate bodhicitta, the combination of the two. Actually, I can read from, probably easier, the three principal aspects of the path, Lama Tsongkhapa. Will give us a sense of this mind. So yesterday I read the verse about how you tell when you've generated the mind of enlightenment. And then, having completed the analysis of the right view, which is the view, when we think emptiness, we have to make sure we're not thinking extremes. None of this practice is extreme. Like we said with the perseverance, not full on, then full off. We take a middle way approach, you know, because we have to think, I'm sustaining this, not just for the rest of this life, but for future lives, particularly if we take Bodhisattva vows, we've made that commitment, right? So in here for the long haul. So we don't want to crash and burn. So we have to plug away, plug away. So that's on the joyous effort side. And then in terms of the view, as soon as we hear emptiness, what do we think? Nothing exists. Voidness is what we think. What we have to always add to that is empty of inherent existence, empty of true existence, empty of existing from its own side by way of its own characteristics. We have all these different expressions for that because our mind will understand one of those, but also because there are different schools of thought that presented that. There must be something there from its own side. There must be something. And things exist conventionally. Of course they exist. It's not saying nothing exists out there. That's the nihilism view. So this is why we need more teachings on this. We need a lot of teachings on this. But then also the view of eternalism, the other extreme, or permanence, that freaks out when the slightest change happens because our mind grasps that, even though intellectually we know we're not going to exist forever. Even though intellectually we know things change all the time. But as soon as they do, what does the mind do? Because we grasp at the permanence, isn't it? So we've got to find our way between these two extremes, the middle way path, and say, this is in sync. It's neither extreme, but finding the correct view. And so then the definition of having completed all that analysis okay. Perhaps I'll start with the definition of not having completed it. That can be helpful. If the appearance of dependent relation, in other words, when we hear emptiness, we've got to think everything's dependent. And we know that too intellectually, but sometimes we just don't join the dots. If the appearance of dependent relation, which is unbetraying, is accepted separately from emptiness, as long as they are seen as separate, one still hasn't realized the Buddha's intent. In other words, become a Buddha. Well, the Buddha's intent of the teachings. The definition of having completed the analysis of the right view, if these two realizations are happening simultaneously without alternation, which is realizing that when something arises, its emptiness arises at the same time. Now, without having had the teachings about that, it's so elaborate and we've only got a few minutes to go. It's just a taster to a future module. Not that far away. And from seeing dependent relation as completely unbetraying, in other words, we've investigated the fact that everything is indeed interdependent. There's nothing that exists from its own side. There's not some partless particle there somewhere. There's not a God particle. Oops, sorry. You spent so much money on the research. The way all objects are apprehended as truly existence, at that time, the analysis of the ultimate view is complete. Furthermore, appearance eliminates the extreme of existence, the fact that we see things, and emptiness eliminates the extreme of non-existence. If you realize how emptiness manifests in the manner of cause and effect, then you're not captivated by wrong notions holding extreme views. In this way, you realize exactly the vital points of the three principal aspects of the path: resort to seeking solitude, generate the power of effort, and quickly accomplish your final goal, my child. So once you've had these realizations, then do your retreat. And you will quickly become a Buddha. Simple. Sorry. I'm sorry. Don't delete. I won't say that. Okay. So we're just about running out of time, but I'll read Deb's comment. I've been happily working on the first two perfections. I'm rejoicing in that. Chipping away at the second two and avoiding the last two. What is my next big step? Up the ante with each. I think you've answered that. No, this is the, no. The ones that you're working on, so you say happily you're working away at those ones. Apply whatever understanding you have of emptiness to each of those. So it's not like you have to separately go there. So the empty, so then in the practice of the generosity, as we said yesterday, You know, the practice of generosity, the object, empty of inherent existence, the giver, empty of inherent existence, the recipient, the act of giving. So you, in other words, it's a dependent relationship. There has to be a receiver if you're giving, for example. There has to be, you know, so none of it existing inherently from its own side, because why? With some, whatever level of understanding of emptiness, the understanding is, therefore, everything is possible. Everything is possible. Because it knocks on the head the fact that everything's permanent, fixed. If that were the case, nothing's possible. We'd be wasting our time having this conversation. So everything is absolutely possible. It's in our hands. It's in our minds. You know, we can transform it all. Next module. I just had to put a plug. So we keep, yeah. So keep at it. Keep at it. Because the more we do, the more we understand. So thank you, everybody. Here we come to the end of this very brief outline of the introduction. I was going to read something from, there's another book I like, Perfections, Sonam Rinchen. It's too elaborate. Good one to read, to follow up on. I'm trying to get it so it's not glary. Meantime, from all the virtues that we've created by listening to the teachings, by seeing how we're applying it live, by having these conversations on the chat, by wishing to engage with this in our practice, and you know, may the precious Bodhi mind arise and grow, and may that grown already in my mind and the mind of any being not decline but increase more and more for the benefit of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, as always. You're beautiful.
Thank
Very
you.
Incredible.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Chakula.
I also
Have a great day.
I also wanted to add, for anyone who's still online, in case before you're all, I was going to say Zoom off, unzoom off, I'm not sure.
Thank you.
I can't stop the humour. Is 4 p.m. we have a Zambala practice. So Zambala, you know, for practice, for generating the wealth of the Dharma, or generating wealth for the Dharma to continue. I was going to mention, we've been talking about cameras, just in case anyone is interested. We're wanting to purchase another camera because, you know, a high quality camera for the teachings, which will be truly amazing. And apparently a couple of people have offered something towards it, but I think the cost is around $700 or so, just because people have been asking, is there a way they can contribute? I just thought to mention. So a couple of people have apparently been offering something towards that. And if anybody else wishes to, that will continue to make the Zoom teachings improve more and more. We're getting better at it, right? Our technology side. So if you
Venerable
wish to...
Choki, how do you get on the Zambala?
Same link.
Oh, okay.
Same link. We're using the same link for everything.
Okay.
Same Zoom link, 4 p.m. See you there if you're coming along.
Enjoy your lunch.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you very
Bye.
much.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Venerable Choki.
Yes. Oh, Gompo, there you are.
No, just in regard to making a donation.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to praise myself. I did one over the website.
Yes.
If we wanted to give something for the microphone, like I think at the moment there are the to give where it's most needed. So
apparently you can put something in there. I'm not sure. Eva did.
Comment, yes.
Still there,
in the
Eva?
comment.
Leonie?
In the comments, there's an area there.
Comments. Just put it in the comments for camera.
Okay.
And usually what happens is, you know, Venerable also has sort of managing a whole lot of things at the moment, or Matt, who's also, get in touch and say, oh, is that the one that was for this? And, you know, we work it out. So just put it in your comment.
Okay, then. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you.
Hi, thank
Oh,
you.
stay well.
Hi, Zoe.
You well, Gompo?
I'm very well, thanks. I'm really enjoying all the electronic.
I know, it's amazing, isn't it? We've got just so many teachings coming at us, left, right, and centre. It's wow.
I haven't got time to do anything. Not yesterday, but last Saturday night, I was attending teachings in Israel.
Oh yes, with Venerable
Yonton.
Or Venerable Kartsun, or
Venerable Yonton is a resident teacher there now. She was doing wheel sharp weapons, which is
Oh,
one of the ones I was
brilliant.
meaning to look at, and it was just amazing.
yeah, and Venerable Kartsun, who's here, but he's teaching in Israel. Go figure.
There you go. Yeah, exactly right. It's just amazing.
Wonderful. Keep it up.
More teachings now than ever before.
Yeah. You girls want to say hello?
Hi, Gompo. I hope you're going really
Hello.
well.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hi,
Gina.
Nana, what's going?
Hello, Annie.
Well,
Hi, Gompo. Where are you?
Hello. I'm
You're
at
not
home.
up to the screen.
I'm very relaxed at the moment. I haven't actually
Hi, Virginia.
put all the robes I should put on, so I haven't put a video on.
Virginia, so pleased you could make it because you weren't sure you were going to be able to. So it's been fantastic.
Yesterday it was after night shift, so I was a bit blurry-eyed, but I had all the rest of the day to sleep, and I'm all fresh this morning.
Wonderful.
But this is great because even if I'm on night shift, I can still listen in. It just takes 3 hours out of my sleep day, so I can do that. So it's perfect for me. Yeah, I think it's
Fabulous.
just wonderful to be able to have this access. It's great, and I'll tell you, you're a natural. You're very good at it. And you know what?
It started off very weird because you sort of feel like, I don't know, those people on television, they must just look at a camera and I don't know, the crew maybe make faces at them.
You're doing
Venerable Choki.
No, she hasn't been making faces. Only very encouraging ones.
I have to just mention something that sometimes in the Gompa, I struggle a little bit because I'm hard of hearing, and it's just marvelous to be able to hear you so loudly and crisply, and I don't miss anything, and I think that's what I'm really, really enjoying. I don't miss anything.
Yes, well, very kindly, we had donation for this new microphone because at the beginning when we were starting, we weren't ready, you know, and so we didn't have the technology. So we're improving the technology as we go along.
Right.
And
really
so this microphone is like very professional. Oh, it can do all sorts of things. I don't know what, but apparently it can.
it makes really, really good sound for everything. It's wonderful.
Very good. Yeah, excellent. And also with the camera pointing on you directly, it's like sitting in the front row.
Yes.
Well, it is like when I come back, I thought I will sit in the front row because the teaching is more interesting. And I have always been sitting at the side, you know, the same spot. And I said, now you're just right in my face. So
well, I hope that's okay for you.
In a good way. It's right in your face in a good way.
It's like you're talking to us.
We miss you guys. Gals.
Oh, yeah.
Bye.
But let's see the altar too. Yeah.
Yes, and Sky and Venerable Showing.
Yeah.
They're there. Hello, Sky.
You have to go as you do.
And
Margot has made it all.
Margot.
Thank you for your support, Margot.
Yes, marvelous.
We can do it.
So happy you're there.
Wonderful.
Joyce.
Okay. Bye-bye.
See you next time. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Eva.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Take care.
that was nice. I think you'll have to press.
That's how I do it. I press enter.